In an abandoned factory, the protagonist found himself hanging. His ex-fiancée called his name, trying to understand how he felt seeing all his friends in that situation. The protagonist, hurt, thought everything happened due to his fault. Looking at his ex, he affirmed she deserved the worst possible fate. The woman pretended to be sad and told her lover that the guy kept hurting her. The man replied that she should thank the protagonist because thanks to him, they would have supplies for months. Pressing the system that released the rope, he dropped the protagonist into a cage. Inside, several zombies approached, hungry. The protagonist, unforgiving, said if he had another chance to live, he would make them both pay. Suddenly, it seemed like he was back in his body. This happened in the midst of an argument his ex-fiancée was having about the deed to a house. Sitting, he slowly realized he'd get returned just before the apocalypse started. He thought that in his past life, he was deceived by her who not only stole his inheritance but also left him homeless. He remembered that later, a global catastrophe turned most humans into zombies. With the help of some friends he met while wandering, he built a safe zone. That liar, Kui Jing, pretended to be a desperate person looking for refuge. In reality, she was sent by the enemy to destroy everyone. Now he was again in front of her, who was complaining about money and other things. She, arms crossed, demanded attention. He wanted to respond in a sharp manner, but needed to hold back. He tried to act calmly, however, since she would not shut up, he put her out of his house. She could hardly believe it because, until a certain time, he had done everything for her. The protagonist simply closed the door, leaving her outside. Looking at the calendar, he realized there was only a month left for the apocalypse to happen again. He also saw a task system with a new mission that required preparation for the apocalypse. It was a point and reward system for each mission. The protagonist also noticed there was a store in the system where the earned points could be spent. He almost forgot that, in his past life, he saved money for the wedding. That no longer made sense, so he picked up the phone and decided to splurge. Since the world was going to end, he at least wanted to taste a 3 Michelin star meal. He was going to taste for the first time the flavor of 300,000 roasted pork. Upon tasting, he experienced a divine flavor, something incomparable. Without delay, he ate the rest, savoring each piece. As he was eating, the mobile rang again. Looking at the device, he noticed it was the manipulative friend. Picking up, the woman made it clear how dissatisfied she was. The young man, irritated, told her to shut up, as he had no time for her. That's why he hung up the phone, leaving her talking to herself. He then relaxed on the couch for a while, until an idea came about owning a piece of land, since he needed to build the strongest fortress in that place. Thinking about it, he looked for a real estate agency. Upon arrival, he was warmly welcomed by a young attendant. Calmly, he explained he did not want a house, nor to rent an apartment. The sales manager came in and belittled the young man. He told the attendant it made no sense trying to sell something to that young man. He asserted he was just a loser without money, in cheap clothes. The protagonist did not like what he heard. The manager sarcastically said, if the young man could buy even a bathroom, he would do a live broadcast. The protagonist just observed his speech. The protagonist stated it was new to him and he would deal with it later. Looking at the lady, he explained he was not there to rent or sell. Pulling out the credit card, he made it clear he wanted to buy land. With an unexpected attitude, he startled several attendants. The young woman maintained the same attention and courtesy since the beginning. The manager mocked, stating anyone could talk, but he wanted to see it happen. Xiaoming presented some options of lands and companies. However, the protagonist said he didn't need it, because he knew exactly what he wanted. He was looking for something close to mountains and with running water. While he listed the requirements, the attendant looked into the system if there was such a thing. The manager mentioned a lot in the East District that met the requirements. In a mocking tone, he claimed that the protagonist only made absurd demands because he had no money. The protagonist asked if the lot indeed met the requirements. Looking at the page, he noticed the location was good. He decided to take that lot and confirmed they could sign the contract and make the payment. The young woman was surprised to sell a lot with unfinished factories. She just wanted to expedite the contract signing and complete the sale. When the manager checked the payment, he couldn't believe his eyes. The protagonist finalized the purchase and reminded the manager that it was now his turn to keep the promise. The colleagues started the live broadcast showing the manager completing the challenge. On his taskbar, it appeared that he had earned 10 points. He had spent all the wedding money on the land purchase. As he passed near a fat man with a goatee, he realized he knew him. The man did not like seeing him in that place. Determined, his friends live-streamed the manager completing the challenge. As his ex-girlfriend was getting ready, the phone rang. She answered quickly upon realizing it was her secret lover. The person on the other end informed her that the protagonist had spent the wedding money. Upon hearing this, the wicked woman was on the verge of collapsing. Elsewhere, the protagonist knew he needed to buy supplies and build a solid base. He was thinking of how to raise money when there was a knock on the door. It was his ex-girlfriend and her friend, both furious about the money story. Annoyed, he wanted to know what they were talking about. Irritated, the witch told him she knew about the land purchase with the wedding money. He thought it was ridiculous, as she wanted him to put her name on the deed. He showed that he had money but would not let her spend a cent. He told her he knew about her love affair with Lee Shuxian. The other one tried to appease, saying it was just a couple's problem. Out of patience, he put them both outside and closed the door. In the elevator, the two were talking. Now the friend thought the situation was lost. She already had plans to harm her friend's ex-boyfriend. The protagonist went to the purchased land and visited the unfinished factory. He chatted with builders and showed the desired adjustments. The engineer stated that it would cost a higher amount to undertake everything. The protagonist asked for an estimate, and the man calculated at least 20 million. Without showing any doubt, the young man assured that he would make the transfer within a week. He said he wouldn't run away and they could keep the land in case anything went wrong. While he was there, his ex-girlfriend's friend showed up looking for him. Curious, she wanted to know what he was doing and put her hand on his arm. Despite the young woman offering a lot of affection, he knew she was not worth it. She had many doubts about the land while continuing to hold his arm. Annoyed, he pulled his arm away and stated it was none of her business. The witch's friend was upset about being rejected by an unimportant person. He simply continued issuing orders on how the base should be built. The girl didn't want to miss the opportunity that her friend had already wasted. After some time at the construction site, the protagonist returned home. He believed he could sell the house to several people, as the end of time would come and nothing else would matter. As he reflected on this, he was thinking of ways to raise more money. Someone knocked on the door persistently. By the voice, he realized it was the neighbor below, since he always had an interest in the house. He had never thought of selling it, as he intended to live there after the wedding. After listening to the man's remarks, he explained that he had stayed home and went to bed early. He asked the neighbor to stop with that. He knew about the interest and would sell to him. The man could hardly believe this day had come. However, the protagonist imposed a condition. The house could not be delivered before 6 months, but he required a deposit of 5 million. He asked if the neighbor agreed, and he immediately accepted. However, the man was anxious and wanted a contract to secure the deal. The protagonist pondered that it would not be worth it, as he would not be able to enjoy the house peacefully. He thought as soon as the 5 million were transferred, he could repay the loan. Before that, he needed to complete the system task and claim the reward. Working in the food sector, he needed to secure supplements for the whole year. People watched the quantity of products and thought he was not very normal. He already had several carts completely full. People commented on the reason for that absurd purchase. On the mission panel, it indicated that the objective had been completed. The protagonist knew that, in the future, improving the attributes would be essential. He needed to choose the best box of supplements. He opted for the magic box, a ring that stored 500 square meters of products. Satisfied, he gained that extra space. The time stopped within the space meant that the products would remain fresh. A new task arose, demanding 10 years of sustainability. The supermarket manager appeared, wanting to know who was causing such a commotion. Upon seeing the protagonist, he realized that he knew him from school times. He also did not like seeing him again. He remembered his and his colleagues' actions in the past. Now he saw that man again in front of him. He asked if he was still intimidating others as before. He showed the carts and explained he was just shopping as any other customer. Annoyed, the manager ordered him to pay for everything or free the carts. An hour later, the payment was finalized. The cost was high, and the manager promptly handed over the card machine. With his card, he made payment without hesitation. With that, the manager was surprised to see the transaction went through successfully. Along with the security guards, he decided to distance himself from the young man. However, the protagonist still had unresolved business with him and called him back. He stated that a customer who purchases properly and pays correctly deserves respect. The upset manager claimed he should not cause problems. Other customers, with their cell phones in hand, commented that the manager disrespected consumers. The protagonist insisted on wanting an honest apology. When the manager found out he would buy 10 times more, he was in disbelief. He checked the cart machine to confirm the available credit. Seeing the value, he was surprised. Rightly so, the protagonist kept insisting on the apology. Otherwise, he would not buy anything else. Thus, the manager had no choice but to apologize. The young man advised him to be more careful in the future. When everything was sorted out, the manager wanted to know why he made such an absurd purchase. He recommended working with a wholesaler. The protagonist asked if he knew a reliable one. Soon, the man called a friend, indicating a potential new client. Shortly thereafter, they were already waiting for Jean. He didn't take long to arrive, driving his luxurious car. He nearly ran over his own friend. The protagonist, seeing him drive so arrogantly, thought he had never been deceived before. The man got out of his car with his overcoat and his tobacco. He asked if this was the client mentioned on the call. Yang confirmed and introduced Jiang Xiaoyong. He shared that they had studied together in high school. Slowly, the protagonist began to remember that person. The smell of tobacco filled the environment. He remembered this guy was somewhat courageous. The man realized he was a young guy who wore questionable branded clothes. Displeased, Jiang blamed his friend for introducing a bad customer. Yang tried to argue that he was an excellent customer. The protagonist claimed he couldn't even be scared by someone who disrespected people. This deeply affected the man as he felt veins popping on his face. Fearlessly, the protagonist repeated that he just underestimated others. It seemed the man had only paid attention to the part where he called him ignorant. Yang asked the young man to avoid touching his brother's sore spot. Jiang, already furious, scolded Yang once more. He asked about the desired merchandise and the form of payment. The young man said that if he would stop adjusting his collar, he could show the account. Seeing the balance, the businessman could hardly believe the available amount. The proposal was $1 million up front, with $4 more million when the goods were ready. He wanted rice, salt, snacks, drinks, or any other food. Jiang changed his expression and asked the young men to follow him. Showing a warehouse full of goods, he stated that taking a whole shipment would receive a discount of 10%. The protagonist claimed that this would depend on the origin and quality of the items. He observed closely and noticed that the outer layer was almost expired. Taken aback, the man noticed that the young man knew about business. The protagonist thought of backing out of the deal, since he wanted good quality products. He confirmed that for those near-rotted goods, he had other plans. Since the man offered a 50% discount, he would take everything nearing expiry. The payment, however, would be made in a month, using a house as collateral. Even the nearly expired and expired products would still have value. The man didn't understand what he meant. Ignoring the doubts, he only requested the goods to be shipped out as quickly as possible. At that moment, the phone rang, and somebody inquired about the house selling. The young man claimed he was busy and asked Jiang to speed up the delivery of the goods. Yang commented to Jiang that he brought an important client. The gentleman who bought the home took the $4 million deposits as agreed upon. The protagonist found it odd that the man didn't even visit the house before transferring the money. But the old man explained that his granddaughter needed to change schools, making the residence a priority. He told that this man was very honest because he disclosed it all at once, not fearing that the price would increase. Hearing this, the gentleman widened his eyes and became apprehensive. The protagonist reassured him, assuring that he wouldn't raise the price or back out of the deal. After signing the documents, he handed them over to the buyer, relief washing over him. Looking at the old man, he thought that kind and honest people would have difficulty surviving the apocalypse. He asked the gentleman to wait and requested the current address where he was living. Then he returned to the building site to check the construction progress. The second part of the funds had been completed, and they informed him that the money would be transferred shortly. The construction was 70% to 80% finished. The warehouse was already prepared, and the gate installed as requested. Considering this, the protagonist asked Jean to deliver the goods to that address. The people hired to help considered the young man generous for paying $2,000 per person. The protagonist was analyzing the best way to organize the products, separating fresh fruits and other items. The work lasted until night, when he finally stopped to assess everything. The taskbar showed that he had supplied for 10 years. A new box appeared in the system's store. He carefully examined the system's bar and its functions. He believed he was lucky to acquire skills before the apocalypse. He won a mind's eye, allowing him to see people's hostility. He was satisfied, for he could identify threats before chaos began. The next task required him to be fully armed. He liked it, because that was exactly what he planned. During the night, he wandered the market looking for supplements. The protagonist observed the movement as he walked around the place. A voice in the crowd caught his attention, someone trying to bargain. It was the man who was having a secret affair with the protagonist's ex-girlfriend. The protagonist noticed he was buying a fake jade bracelet. Further on, he found exactly what he was looking for. Approaching a seller, he asked if he had something stronger. The man claimed he was just a guarantor, and if he needed something special, he should make it himself. However, that was not enough. He needed something even more powerful. The seller suspected he was there to cause trouble. Suddenly, the merchant's phone vibrated with a bank transfer notification. The protagonist warned that he had made the deposit and therefore should get what he wanted. In view of the amount received, the man asked a companion to watch over his goods. Shortly afterwards, he called the protagonist to accompany him to a place where he could find something more potent. He showed a homemade product able to handle 1 or 2 chickens. The protagonist did not consider it strong enough. Then, the merchant reflected for a moment before deciding to show something better. He had some replicas tucked away. However, the protagonist considered it an insult to offer something so insignificant after receiving an advance. The merchant didn't know how to justify that proposition. The young man warned that he had paid 10% in advance and was acquiring $2 million in equipment. The attendant was apprehensive, not understanding what work sector he was in. After thinking, he understood the request and went to look for something more suitable. He unlocked the safe and watched if no one was paying attention. With a serious face, he affirmed that the protagonist had found the right person. He assured he could meet that demand, but demanded payment in cash. As the protagonist was leaving, the attendant recommended he be careful when leaving. The man who was having an affair with his ex-girlfriend recognized the young man immediately. That fat, bearded man wanted to know what he was doing there. The man showed excessive interest in the young man's financial and personal life. The protagonist believed that this was the ideal time to test his new ability. He used the mind's eye to measure the hostility around him. The protagonist asked if that man was deluding Jing to get favors. The old man with the beard got angry when he heard the young woman say his jewels were fake. The attendant asked if the protagonist knew that man, and he replied that he was just another enemy. Before leaving, the young man asked them to have mercy on that man. The guys around were eager to teach the old man a lesson. Shouyong asked the young men to have consideration for him. As part of the lesson, he got a slight kick in the butt. The man fell to the ground, cursing the protagonist's life. 2 days later, at the fort the protagonist built, the goods arrived. The mission to be fully prepared was completed. The reward and credited bonuses included a portion of physical enhancement that left the protagonist satisfied. He held the flask, noticing it was twice as effective as the one from the store. With that, he prepared to take full advantage of the benefits. The intense pain of enhancement caused him fatigue. He knew that the physical strength of an ordinary man was 5. Now it had risen to 40. Upon observing the store system, he noticed there were extra portions for physical enhancement. He decided to test the enhancement a little more and get more benefits. With the extra 8 points, his physical strength increased by 60%. He needed something to test his new ability and found a metal beam. The protagonist grabbed the bar and used his newly acquired powers. When he kicked the beam, he managed to bend it perfectly. With his new strength, he threw the metal away. There was the proof the power increase was real. Now, after receiving the shipment, he felt properly protected. He stored all the equipment in a specific location. Did you know that, in 2 days, the apocalypse would begin? The protagonist sighed at the memory of the kind old man. He was certain that this man would not survive the betrayal of humanity in the approaching chaos. With this in mind, he decided to send some essential supplies to aid him. Taking his car, the protagonist set off towards the old man's residence. Upon reaching the address, he realized that he had to use the GPS to locate it. He climbed long stairs until he finally knocked on the door. He took an accessory off his fingers, making the supplies appear before him. Meanwhile, on the other side, the old man announced that he was opening the door. Upon spotting the young man, his expression altered, fearing he was the rent collector. However, recognizing him made him even more frightened. His gaze turned to the stacked boxes, and confused, he inquired what they were all about. After hearing the protagonist's explanation about the supplies, he finally understood. Still, he couldn't comprehend how the young man had carried so many boxes on his own. The protagonist observed the structure of the house and noted that it was sturdy enough to withstand for a while. He pondered how to explain the upcoming apocalypse without scaring the old man. Looking at the desk, he noticed a photo that caught his attention. He immediately recognized the young woman in the picture. It was Shanshan, his former companion from the apocalyptic times. His heart pounded harder once he was certain that it was her. Turning to the old man, he asked if the young woman in the photo was Meng Shanshan. He wanted to know where his granddaughter was at the moment. The man remembered that, in the other life, Shanshan blamed herself for causing so much trouble for her grandfather. He was determined to change this reality. Placing the photo back, he stated that the old man could no longer move out. Seeing the man panic, he asked him to let him finish before jumping to conclusions. However, the old man couldn't understand anything the protagonist was saying. He had anticipated this reaction. He tried to explain in a simpler way and asked if he knew about periods of famine. Seeing that the old man finally understood, he stored the supplies once again. This further frightened the old man, who had no idea what kind of magic he was using. The young man then revealed that he had superpowers and could predict the future. Next, he asked where his granddaughter's school was, as they were going to fetch her immediately. Getting in the car, they rapidly set off for the school. Upon arrival, they got out and headed to the dormitories, searching for the young girl's room. Meanwhile, inside the school, Meng Shanshan was facing a complicated situation. An arrogant young girl was mockingly touching her face, teaching her a lesson. After learning a lot, Shanshan understood that she should not mess with someone else's boyfriend. Even so, the assaulter didn't feel she had learned her lesson just yet. One of her friends decided to also pay special attention to the length of Shanshan's hair. The young girl asked why they were doing this to her. Before she could answer about her relationship with the other girl's boyfriend, her grandfather arrived. Furious, he shouted for the girls to stay away from his granddaughter. However, the young spectators who had been watching the scene surrounded the elderly man. They showed a total disrespect for the elderly. The protagonist, witnessing the scene, could not hold back. He decided he would also educate these young people. At first, he tried to speak in a comprehensible way, cautioning them not to cause trouble. However, since he was not listened to, he decided to be more instructive. As a result, one of the boys lost balance and fell to the ground. The others were furious and decided to confront him. The protagonist quietly watched, knowing already what was going to happen next. Even so, the young people pressed on, trying to solve the situation their way. The protagonist had already warned them to behave. But since they did not listen to him, he elevated the education level. He grabbed one of them by the collar of the shirt and showed him exactly where the ground was. The boy remained there for quite a while. Another boy, holding a sharp object, thought he would have better luck. However, the lesson was the same. With a light kick, he fell hard and made close contact with the ground. Jiang then walked up to the girls, who were looking at him apprehensively. One of them asked what he planned to do. The girl thought she wouldn't be properly educated for the harm she had caused. But when she realized that she wasn't going to get off that easily, her eyes widened. The protagonist knew of her habit of pulling hair, but he advised that the new season required a slightly shorter cut, and kindly he did her the favor of updating her look. The girl was surprised, but upon touching her newly cut hair, she found that she liked it. Her joy was so profound that tears of gratitude swelled in her eyes. Jiang stated that short hair could potentially save her life soon. Without prolonging the conversation, he informed the grandfather and the granddaughter that he was leaving. Shanshan wanted to know where they were going. He replied she wouldn't have to return to school anymore. At first she was confused, but the grandfather started to explain. Annoyed, the young girl reprimanded her grandfather, claiming she had already warned him about trusting charlatans. She knew that many people were scamming others. Jiang, however, explained it wasn't a scam. The world was truly coming to an end. Surprised, Shanshan asked what he meant by that. The protagonist, dragging towards his fortress, started to explain. She wanted to know what he meant by "there'll be a famine." He clarified that famine was just a simplified term for her grandfather to understand. But in fact, the correct word was apocalypse. Upon hearing this, her eyes widened. Still dubious, she grabbed her phone and started Googling. Looking at the news and videos showing chaos spreading throughout the world, she began to believe. There were images of people biting each other like wild dogs, but those were only the first signs. The apocalypse was about to begin. Jiang explained that it was all caused by an unknown toxic fog. It was gradually affecting a significant portion of the population, and those who hadn't been affected yet would not be spared, because once bitten, they would also be transformed. The protagonist asked if she knew what a zombie was, and he warned that either the following day or the one after at the latest, the first of them would appear. In the middle of his explanation, he faced traffic congestion. He thought it would still be a few days before the situation worsened once and for all, but he could not afford to be stuck in traffic. Looking around, he noticed some people were already acting strangely. Nevertheless, most were still more concerned with their own issues. Some drivers tried to escape the traffic jam selfishly, making the situation worse. In spite of the disorganized traffic, what truly concerned him were signs of mental confusion in some people. The elder beside him advised Jiang not to get involved in traffic arguments. When they finally managed to get out of the traffic jam, they thought they were safe, but they were wrong. A driver of dubious intellect kept chasing their car at high speed. Jiang frowned. The bastard was really persistent. Shortly after, the man managed to overtake them and stopped his car in the middle of the road, blocking their way. He got out of his car, calling his friends to help settle the situation. He was determined to make Jiang and his passengers regret disrespecting him in traffic. Upon arrival at the fortress, the elder was impressed by the size and structure of the place. Both he and Shanshan found it all a bit exaggerated. Jiang simply asked them to rest. Meanwhile, he enjoyed the view, sipping his coffee. Shortly after, the young girl appeared visibly pleased after a good night's sleep. He then asked her to accompany him to check the fortress. The walls were made of reinforced concrete. The gate, controlled remotely, was 3 centimeters thick steel. Jiang explained that only the 3 of them were authorized to enter the fortress. Shanshan, curious, asked what they would do if survivors appeared. Jiang sighed and replied that, in the apocalypse, people would become unpredictable. The dark side of human nature would amplify. The grandfather and granddaughter, watching from above, noticed there was a specific area for survivors. Jiang ensured everything had been calculated, including the food supply. He showed them the warehouse where he stored supplies. Before teaching them how to protect themselves, he used the mind's eye to analyze if they bore any hostility. When he realized they were both kind and trustworthy, he continued the tour. He handed each of them a protective item, asking never to part with it. The elder assured he would guard that object with his life. Meanwhile, the system issued a new mission: find old companions. Jiang found this great, as he had been worried about how to locate them. Before leaving, he reinforced the rules to the 2 and sped off in the car. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, a group of friends gathered to have fun at a karaoke bar. The night was going well until 2 of them went to the bathroom. Upon coming out, one of them accidentally bumped into a young girl. The friends apologized politely. Even so, the girl's jealous boyfriend didn't accept the situation. Startled, the blonde youth fell to the ground. His friend, a guy with glasses, asked if he was okay. Politely, he asked the man not to be so aggressive. The jealous boyfriend, however, didn't like the response. He grabbed the bespectacled guy by the collar of his shirt, trying to intimidate him. A waiter, still recovering from a cold, noticed the commotion and decided to intervene. He approached and asked everyone to calm down. The jealous boyfriend interpreted this as a challenge. Annoyed, he grabbed the waiter by his clothes and ordered the two friends to get out of there. Shortly after, the friends returned to room 3090 of the karaoke bar. The others, curious, asked what had happened. They explained it all started with a simple bump in the bathroom. One of the friends asked why they didn't fight back. Jiang Xiaoyong answered that there was no need. The situation had already ended. But the door was kicked open. Several boys entered the place with not-so-friendly expressions. Their friends were surprised by the sudden turmoil. The jealous boyfriend brought the waiter with him. He was there to get revenge and teach a lesson to those who challenged him. The fun group realized things were about to get ugly. Outside the karaoke, Jiang arrived. He was there to reclaim one of his friends, and was not surprised to find him at a karaoke. Climbing the stairs, he was greeted in an unfriendly manner. In the midst of the confusion, friends helped each other. The rich kid, trying to impress his girl, asked if she was better yet. She, still annoyed, felt that the person who bumped into her did not get what he deserved. The friends, tired of the situation, decided they couldn't take it anymore. The impatient man believed that these lower people were too bold. The confusion grew and took unexpected proportions. While one lay on the ground, others were starting more disagreements. Among them, one of the young boys was trembling without being able to react. In the middle of the crowd, a waiter was sweating and feeling his body strange. That boy, with an empty look, watched everything without further control of his own actions. On impulse, he ran towards the young boys, ready to attack them. As soon as he reached the target, he bit into the shoulder. The pressure of the attack was intense, preventing any reaction. The most fearful of the group was just watching, fearing he would also be targeted. Several people tried to separate the waiter, who didn't stop. Those who tried to stop also got hit. The state of strangeness rapidly advanced among those involved. The protagonist arrived just in time to contain the waiter. Holding him firmly, he lifted him a bit to prevent new attacks. Then he leaned him against the wall to avoid further problems. Still controlling the situation, he asked everyone to stop fighting. Among those present, some had injuries on their fists, others on their shoulder. The jealous boyfriend ordered his bodyguards to continue the lesson. Jiang looked at his old comrade and asked if he was okay. Jiang Xiaoyong thought the question was odd, but assured he was not hit. The protagonist asked him to follow. Even so, the jealous youngster wouldn't let everyone leave the place. The commotion ended when one of the bodyguards started coughing. The protagonist noticed the wound on his shoulder. Looking closely, he asked if the injury was caused by the waiter. He got a hostile confirmation. Soon after, he realized that the overall reaction would take some time. Jiang dragged the waiter outside. He put him in a safe place, reflecting on the safety of the group. At that moment, the door was still intact. Looking around, he asked if anyone else would take responsibility for the chaos. Jiang Xiaoyong, confused, found it odd this youngster who kept repeating his name. The fortunate one, devoid of intelligence, kept provoking the protagonist. Patience was no longer the same, but he kept his composure. With a touch of irony, he replied politely. The bodyguard, witnessing the scene, advanced to resolve the issue. This one also ended up on the ground, easily knocked down. While fallen, he began to convulse. The protagonist raised his gaze and asked if anyone else wanted to test his fists. Everything was settled. Jiang Xiaoyong asked they take their friends and wait outside. At the same moment, the people on the other side were also withdrawing. The young blonde was still upset for not getting her revenge. Everyone was stopped by the protagonist, who needed to talk a bit more. He advised these people not to drink so much that they can't even remember their names. His words were so sensible that one man could not stand up. A man was locked in. The door wouldn't open, and he knocked so someone from the outside would unlock it. Meanwhile, another man was already transformed and lunging at him. In the face of that agitation, the protagonist had no choice but to lock the door. When a waiter asked the protagonist if they needed help, he asked that the door be kept completely closed. It was said that it was a rabid flu and that they should keep their distance. Obeying his words, the waiter locked the door. Meanwhile, the protagonist was leaving that place with his friends. The noise still bothered the waiter, who remained worried. Another employee who knew what was happening explained that it was a rabid flu. He decided to check the security cameras. When they noticed what was happening, they were horrified. The scenes shown by the cameras made them call the police. The protagonist wanted to save the friend and asked they hurry, as the place was no longer safe. They left there, and Jiang Xiaoyong wanted to thank for helping to save everyone. The protagonist told him his name was Jiang, and that he had been hired to defend him. They wanted to know more about the rabid flu mentioned earlier. They questioned if there was any remedy to contain the disease. He explained that this disaster wasn't going away, it would only get worse, and that the world was in its final days. As he was saying this, a strange noise was heard from outside the car. When the friends looked, they noticed that the outbreak was already spreading. The protagonist explained that things were just getting started and everything would get worse. Everyone agreed to obey his orders to continue surviving. The task panel showed that he had completed the mission of rescuing a ride. With that, he could see the rewards available in the system's store. The boxes were still there and all seemed useful. As soon as he'd returned to the fortress, he would rescue them. There was a bigger issue related to trust. He knew that in his past life, his friend Jiang Xiaoyong had been betrayed by one of them. But just by looking, the protagonist couldn't identify who the traitor was. Kui Jing received a call from Lei, who wanted to know how things were. As she was talking to that gentleman, loud knocks at the door startled her. After looking through the peephole, she saw that it was safe and opened. Her friend said that old Liu from the first floor had been taken that morning. Kui Jane wanted to know what happened. The friend explained that the police and ambulance had taken him together. That was when she understood why there was so much noise that morning. The redhead said it seemed to be a rabid flu and asked if the supplies had already been sent. The young woman, wearing a schoolgirl outfit, thought her friend should call Lei Shuxian and ally with him. Kui Jing wanted to know how she managed to plan all of this and how she knew so much about her ex-fiance's life. She also concluded that her ex already knew that all this chaos would happen. The redhead suggested that when she earned enough money, she should ask Li for the most part. Headlights cut through the darkness of the night as a black car crossed through the base gates. The doors opened and everyone got out, cautiously looking around. Zhang Qi commented that the place seemed like a fortress. The protagonist confirmed that was everyone's first reaction. Sheng Bo and his granddaughter asked if the leader was okay. He told them not to worry and informed them he would now introduce the new members. The protagonist introduced Zhang Qi and his friends. After that, he introduced them to Sheng Bo and his granddaughter, who greeted them happily. Then he asked Sheng Bo to show the place to the new members and explain the rules. One of Zhang Qi's friends raised his hand to draw attention. He asked if they could receive any weapons and claimed that they could help defend the place. Hearing this, the protagonist merely looked at him askance. Xiao Kai advised Miming to be careful with his words. The protagonist assured that in a few days, everyone would receive weapons. Looking at the injured man, he ordered him to be taken to the medical room. After cleaning up, Xiao Kai commented that it was very comfortable. Yiming asked him why he had stopped him and affirmed that if he hadn't done that, they would already have weapons. He also said that, at best, they were being protected and, at worst, they were under house arrest. Xiao Kai asked him not to talk like that because the protagonist had saved them. Despite being friends, they were having disagreements. Angry, Yiming asked them to look at how they were treating Chen Chong and how the medical room looked more like a prison. He found the host's behavior suspicious. Xiao Kai stated that if they were wrong, they would be betraying their savior, but Naini replied he would rather betray than be betrayed. He also said that they only had an old man and a girl, so they could capture both when the protagonist was out. His friends looked at him to understand if he was serious. Quickly, he said it was just a joke. The friends were relieved that he was not serious. As they were leaving, he thought that in chaotic times, everyone had to be ruthless. In another room, Sheng Bo and his granddaughter arrived to bring the update. He informed the protagonist that everyone was settled in and that the severely injured one's name was Chen Chong. The protagonist thanked him and told them to rest as they didn't know what could happen the next day. Before they left, he caught their attention again. He asked them to keep an eye on the other two friends of Zhang Qi because he had a feeling that there was a traitor among them. He waited for everything to calm down because he needed to check the system's store. His goal was to rescue the boxes he had observed earlier. Supply boxes to acquire resources for the apocalypse. After successfully rescuing all of them, he found various items and ammunition. Looking at the pile of supplies, he remarked that they would come in handy as they were in the apocalypse. The other day, early in the morning, 3 cars approached at high speed. The vehicles arrived at the protagonist's base, and someone asked if that was really the right address. It was a man who, after confirming the address by call, said that as soon as they were done there, they would eat together. He ordered his subordinates to break into the base. He watched as they tried with all their might. After a while, a subordinate stated that the structure was too thick to be broken into. The man complained while he wondered who would have such a sturdy door in a normal house. He asked his subordinates for the heavy weapons. Upon opening the heavy weapons box, they found only bottles. After setting fire to the bottles, they threw them over the base's wall, intending to invade. The flames spread rapidly, leaving the base in danger. Upon seeing the fire, everyone quickly rushes out carrying buckets of water. While fighting the flames, Shanshan notes that the protagonist was right. From the warehouse, the protagonist and Sheng Bo emerge armed. The protagonist states that he wants to see who's causing trouble. In the watchtower, Sheng Bo spots a man down below and says he looks familiar. Surprised, he remembers that it was the same individual who had a road rage incident. Looking up, one of the subordinates notices something in the watchtower. He alerts his boss, who recognizes the protagonist and states that he was specifically looking for him. The invading leader demands the protagonist come out, or his base will be set on fire. The protagonist states they have 5 minutes to leave. Hearing this, the invader orders more boxes of flammable cocktails. Suddenly, a new mission is issued. With the base under attack, neutralizing the threat becomes necessary. The protagonist knows they don't deserve warnings. Leaving them alive would just bring problems in the future. Without hesitation, he fires his gun. The shot hits the invader's arm. Holding the wound, he screams in pain. The protagonist comments that he's rusty after a few quiet days. Realizing the strength of the weaponry, the enemies retreat. However, no one would come out unscathed. The following shots took down several of the invaders' subordinates. The leader manages to get in the car and orders the driver to accelerate. Shengbo watches the escape and comments that they're fleeing by car. The protagonist tells him to calm down, as there's an automatic rifle for that. He fires a burst of bullets at the fleeing vehicle. He reloads his gun and continues the shooting. Shengbo, impressed, thinks he didn't even demonstrate such skill during his service. The shots hit the cars, driving away the enemies. The protagonist instructs Shengbo to order the others to clean up the mess. However, he reconsiders and decides to let the wounded turn into zombies so Zhang Qi and Shanshan can train. He then states that he's changed his mind and has other plans for them. On the way, Lai Shuxiang asks if they're close to the destination. Wen Shuya, with a sweet voice, responds that it must be at the next intersection. Kui Jing notices that whenever Lai Shuxiang is around, Wen Shuya behaves like this and already understands her intentions. She calls her friend to go together. Surprised, Wen Shuya asks if she also needs to go. She should, since she's the only one who knows the exact location. The redhead tries to find excuses to avoid following her. The two head towards the base. Realizing they have drifted off, Lai Shuxiang asks his group to be ready. He orders them to follow him as soon as he starts the car. His subordinates confirm the order. When Shuya asks her friend why she dragged her into this, she responds that she knows her well and is aware of her strategies. However, something up ahead grabs her attention. She wonders what is happening. The friend speculates whether there had been an armed confrontation. Kui Jing analyzes the scene and concludes that, given the state of the place, there was probably a dispute between two groups. The friend suggests he didn't survive and worries about the fate of supplies. While a man undergoes transformation, they ponder returning, but decide to investigate more closely. Right in front of the base gate, they try to force it open to see if it does, but upon trying, they realize that the gate is sealed, and they can't even see inside. Suddenly, they hear a voice calling and look in the direction of the sound to identify who it is. From the top of the watchtower, Shanshan asks who they are and how they found the place. The two down below announce they know the owner and one of them has a close relationship with him. Soon, she turns and informs the protagonist that there are two girls outside, and one claims to be his girlfriend. The ex-deceiver imagines that the woman up top is the reason for the protagonist's behavior change. She tells them not to worry, as Lai has brought some weapons, and they just need to make him open the gate. The protagonist questions what they are doing there. Without wasting time, he activates Mind's Eye. The redhead tries to appear cute, even feeling anger at being disregarded by him. The protagonist already knows of their intentions and Li Shuxiang's. Stunned, they try to figure out how he found out. Before they can come up with another excuse, he fires a few warning shots. From above, he hears his ex incredulous as she realizes he had the nerve to fire so close to them. Wen Shuya comments that he is armed and that they should talk calmly, but her friend insists he wouldn't dare shoot. The protagonist asserts that shooting at them would be too easy. Both hear a noise and look behind. All they see are myriad patients with raging flu. What he wanted was to see chaos spread. The infected growled and ran towards the two. They barely managed to dodge and flee. Lai Shuxiang hears his name and looks at who is calling. Running and screaming, they beg to be saved. Frightened, he complains about the presence of the infected. He orders his group to act fast. It was at this moment that the situation turned against the traitor. Kui Jing, while swinging her bag, states that she doesn't want to die. She throws the bag at her friend. The bag gets caught on her feet. This makes her fall flat on her face. Fallen and unable to react, she is seized by the zombies. While becoming the meal of the infected, she curses her friend. Running without looking back, Kui Jing claims that she deserved it. In the watchtower, the system reports on the mission completion and announces the cleaning mission. Shanshan questions if they simply turned into zombies. The protagonist explains that there are now several viruses in the air and that, upon contact with a dead or severely injured body, the transformation occurs. He asks that everyone be called for a meeting. Sitting at the table, everyone awaits the discussion. He informs that within the next 2 days, they should stay home so the body can adapt to the virus. Chi shows concern for his friend in the infirmary. The scene shows the friend lying down, starting to show signs of infection. His hand and face are throbbing, and he is sweating excessively. With the havoc caused by the virus, people were going mad. Looking outside, Jiang Xiaoyong noticed that the outside world was in chaos. He told his family that he would need to go to the warehouse to fetch supplies and that nobody should open the door. As he was giving these instructions, someone knocked on the door. Apprehensive, he looked in the direction the noise came from. He gestured for everyone to be quiet. Slowly he approached the door, but before he could open it, he heard a voice asking if he was home. Recognizing the voice, he felt relieved as he realized it was Yang Tao. However, before he could even fully open the door, he was kicked back. Several people invaded his house and immobilized him. Furious, he demanded they let him go. He said he had always treated him well and asked why he was doing this. Yang Tao replied that he was treated like a doormat, but Jiang Xiaoyong rebutted, saying that without him, Yang Tao would be homeless. The intruder, however, seemed dissatisfied with his part in the negotiations and demanded the warehouse key. Jiang Xiaoyong refused to hand over the keys, seeing that he wouldn't get what he wanted. Yang Tao walked towards Jiang Xiaoyong's family. He grabbed his wife by the hair and ordered him to watch. His son tried to react to save his mother. In a desperate move, he bit the aggressor's arm. Angry, the man tossed the child away. Seeing this scene, Jiang Xiaoyong reacted with fury, like any father would. Yang Tao told him not to worry because as long as he cooperated, his family would be safe, and demanded that he took him to the warehouse. When they finally reached the place, the intruders did not like what they saw. "Is this all that's left?" asked Yang Tao. Jiang Xiaoyong answered that it was he who landed that big client. This made Yang Tao reflect for a moment. He said that if they could seize the protagonist's supplies, they would have food for life. Hearing this, Jiang Xiaoyong warned that it's better not to mess with him, as he saw him armed and suspected that he knew about the apocalypse in advance. But Yang Tao didn't care. To him, this was not his problem. Jiang Xiaoyong was confused and asked why it would be his responsibility. That's when he heard that he should fetch the resources in exchange for his family's safety. Taken aback by the answer, he was left speechless. Meanwhile, the scene cuts back to the fort. Everyone was around Chen Chong, watching him squirm. He had transformed into a zombie and was trying to break free. His friends were deeply saddened at seeing him in that state, until Yaming broke the silence and said they needed to kill him. The protagonist, watching him out of the corner of his eye, began to understand his nature. Zhang Qi, surprised, asked what he had said. Yiming repeated that, if Chen Chong broke free, they would all be in danger. But Zhang Qi countered, claiming he was one of them, and questioned if they would give up without even trying. The protagonist intervened and said Yiming was right. Once turned into a zombie, there were practically no chances of recovery. So he drew his knife from its sheath and handed it to Yiming. The young man was confused and asked what he meant by that. "End this," the protagonist replied. When the time came to act, Yiming just trembled. The protagonist provoked him, reminding him he always wanted a weapon and asking him to take the knife and end the friend's suffering. Among the group was someone they all trusted. Zhang Qi took it upon himself and said he would do what was needed. The reluctance in his gaze was visible. The protagonist asked Zhang Qi if he was sure about what he was about to do, warning him that if he was wrong, he would become a murderer. But Zhang Qi, without hesitating, stated he trusted him. Satisfied with the response, the protagonist told him to go ahead. Facing his friend, who squirmed and growled, Zhang Qi mustered courage and brought down the knife swiftly. However, before the blade could hit the zombie, it was stopped. The protagonist grabbed his hand before he did something irreversible. Confused, Zhang Qi questioned why he was stopped. The protagonist explained that the zombie was a special case and still had utility. At that moment, the system notified him that a rare mutant was discovered. Looking at the zombie still growling and trying to break free, the protagonist asked, "Was your name Chen Chong?" Without waiting for confirmation, he declared he had a task for the infected. The scene cuts to another location, showing a high-speed car. The driver loses control and crashes into a pole. Leaving the vehicle, Shang-Chi laments his bad luck. Sad about losing the car, he sighs and says that at least he's almost at his destination. Suddenly, a zombie pops up and jumps at him. In a quick movement, it manages to bite his arm. Shang-Chi shoves the zombie away and runs as fast as he can back to the car. Inside the vehicle, he grabs a crowbar. Turning with force, he hits the creature in the head. Unsatisfied, he delivers a few more blows until the zombie stops moving. He knew this place was not safe. Trembling, he continues his walk towards the base. At the base, many zombies roam from one place to another, hoping to find a victim. The protagonist went out to observe the surroundings and brought some of the base residents to teach them how to deal with the infected. Shanshin comments that the gear is uncomfortable and bothersome, but the protagonist reinforces that zombies are much stronger than humans and that the gear is necessary. Observing from a distance, he notices they were at one end and a threat was approaching from the other. He alerts the group to get ready as they had come into the perception field of the infected. The zombies notice the group's presence and run towards them. The leader reminds the team to always watch each other's backs and keep distance. He dodges the enemy's onslaught and explains that when a zombie misses, that's the best moment to attack. Hearing this, Xiao Kai attacks with a hatchet. The blade hits the zombie's forehead, but has no effect. While Xiao Kai complains, the protagonist uses his mistake as an example of what not to do. But before he can finish the explanation, the zombie jumps on Xiao Kai, who goes into shock and cries for help. The protagonist, observing sideways, says the defense was perfect, but asks Jiang Qi to help his friend. Jiang Qi positions himself behind the zombie and lands a blow on the creature's neck. The protagonist reminds everyone that one hit is not enough. Knowing this, they all attack together until they bring down the monster. Turning to Jiang, the protagonist asks how they did. Jiang was about to answer when he noticed a zombie approaching the protagonist from behind. The infected lunges at him, but is swiftly grabbed by the head. The protagonist, without losing composure, looks at Jiang and asks if he already forgot what was taught about paying attention. Everyone is startled to see he had not let his guard down at any moment. From a nearby debris, Shangji observes the infected prowling the base. He wonders if the protagonist had already met his end, but then he hears his voice. Watching from behind a car, Shangji confirms that it's indeed him. To his surprise, the protagonist was not only alive but hunting mutants with his team. But while Shangji was watching, an infected hidden under the car surges out suddenly. A red-haired woman, zombified, reaches out and grabs his leg. Startled, Shangji loses his balance and falls to the ground. Looking at the terrifying face of the creature, he panicked. The redhead zombie was growling, ready to devour him, but the redhead on top of him was soon blown to pieces. It was the protagonist who fired at the zombie attacking him. Panting, Shangji threw what was left of the zombie to the side. The protagonist asked what he was doing there. Approaching, Shangji said he could not believe he's still alive to see him, but there was a wound on his arm, something that did not go unnoticed. Pointing the gun at him, the protagonist stated that Shangji had been bitten. Terrified, he pleaded not to shoot, claiming he had something important to say. The protagonist asked him to speak, but not to come closer. Shangji said that his former business partner had kidnapped his family to steal the warehouse resources. He pleaded for the lives of his wife and son, knowing these beasts would not hesitate to hurt them. Still unsure, the protagonist thought that despite the profit, the man had helped him greatly in the past. Observing his team, he realized there were far more men than women, creating an imbalance. Suddenly, he heard a system notification sound and thought that finally there was an advantage. The task was to rescue Zhang Shangji's wife and son, with a reward of 25 points. After analyzing the mission, he claimed that he would save Shangji's wife and son. The man, moved, bowed and said he would only be able to repay his kindness in the next life. He asked the protagonist to do what had to be done and end him before he turned into an infected. Looking thoughtfully at Shangji, the protagonist asked Shanshen to bring a bike. Kneeling, Shangji asked why he was being treated with such kindness. Accepting the order, he thanked him. Once on the bike, he pedals as fast as he can. The only things separating him from becoming infected were his thoughts about his wife and son. One of his eyes had already acquired the characteristic tint of the infected. Back at the base, after piling all the killed zombies into a heap, they poured a lot of gasoline. Tired from the work, they set it on fire. The protagonist noted that with their current strength, they could handle 1 or 2 zombies, but facing a group would be very difficult. Turning around, he asked them to follow him. He stopped in front of a shed and called for Shengbo. He said he would go to the city at night and handed over the warehouse key. Worried, Shengbo commented that the city was a mess and asked if he was going alone. Soon, Shou Kai and Zhang Qi volunteered to go along, but the protagonist refused, saying they would be a burden. He traveled by car, prepared for attacks. He complained that the system upgrade took too long. Knowing the mission would be hard, he decided to manually upgrade, which cost him 4 points. Looking at the system interface, he noticed that the cost of manual upgrade had doubled. Still, he had the required amount. Upon purchasing the reward box, 20 points were deducted. A bright light emanated from the car. After opening the box, he received a +5 physical strength enhancement serum. He complained about the light, stating it was like being hit by a flashbang. It was another interesting toy. Excited, he immediately used the serum. His body was agitated. His strength attribute increased from 10 to 15, making him 260% stronger than a normal human. At Zhang Shangji's house, his wife tried to calm the child, assuring that the father would take care of everything. But suddenly, Yang Tao and his henchmen entered the room. Surprised, she asked what they were doing. The 2 men wanted to have fun a bit with the woman. To satisfy their sick curiosity, they tore open her blouse. Seeing the scene of the henchman holding the mother, the son couldn't stand it and tried to help. As they tried to immobilize the woman, who was screaming for help, one of the accomplices approached, frightened by the noise, to see what was going on. Upon noticing his presence, the others invited him to join the fun. Lai, however, gave a warning, which irked his companions. Solemnly, the henchman explained they shouldn't mess with that woman for now. However, he made it clear that once they dealt with her husband, they could do as they pleased. Respecting the momentary decision, the majority backed off, but one of them vowed to return. In tears, the woman embraced her son, who was also crying desperately. Meanwhile, outside, the chaos of the zombies continued. Inside the car, the protagonist drove while thinking that, with 13 resistance points, he was above average. But he noticed that continuing to drive was difficult. Traffic was chaos, with people fighting for survival. At one point, he decided to abandon the vehicle and continue his journey on foot. He realized he was very close to the city, where everything was even more chaotic. Soon, he noticed zombies approaching to devour him, but using his recently gained extra strength and stored defense tools, he handled all of them easily. His speed was now on another level. With his agility and enhanced skills, he had an advantage over the undead. With his sharp hearing, he noted that he was surrounded by infected, and he was still about 800 meters from his destination. That's when the system notified him of a random mission called Encounter. Further ahead, zombies tried to force their way into a supermarket. A group of survivors was cornered inside, fighting to prevent the creatures from entering. Inside the market, people were terrified. A young man was screaming for help while a man who seemed to be a police officer or guard tried to maintain order. He knew the situation was out of control as more and more zombies piled up at the supermarket door. However hard they blocked the entrance, the resistance would not last long. Yet something outside was dealing with the zombies. It was causing fear and astonishment among the survivors who feared an even more dangerous creature might be out there. Despite the risk, the guard decided to check what was happening. He ordered part of the barricades to be removed to peek out. When a small space was open, the guard peered out and saw something moving quickly. Scared, the survivors left the market armed with pieces of pipe and metal bars. The young man, still terrified, feared it might be a mutant. One of the older men questioned his suspicions, but he merely compared the situation to stories he'd heard before. The guard interrupted the discussion, reminding them that it was not a time for debates. He asked everyone to be careful and move slowly to a rendezvous point. Having reached a safe place, the guard paused and observed the stranger who had helped them. Analyzing his movements and abilities, he realized he was different. The young man insisted it could only be a mutant, but the guard disagreed. The protagonist smiled and commented that mutants were not everywhere yet. With a slight smile, the guard concluded that the young man was simply an exceptional survivor. Looking both ways, the guard called for the protagonist to join the group. When he heard they were going to X Garden, he remembered that there was a mansion nearby. Old Song suggested that he join the group because Captain Lai had a gun. Even modestly, the protagonist accepted the invitation for a while. Because of the boy's curiosity about the mansion, they began to wonder if he knew someone who was there. There was uncertainty over the possibility it was a relative or a girlfriend he wished to find. In that chaos, the likelihood of the person he was looking for being already dead was increasing. According to the captain, if they hadn't been taken by zombies, they could have run into that pack of animals. Frodo wanted to understand to which animals he referred. It was a gang of thugs hiding in the eastern city's villages. It was clear that the protagonist needed to keep his guard high when meeting new survivors. Everyone got chills when a zombie approached Captain. The scare nearly caught the man off guard, but the gun was ready. Without any other alternatives, it was necessary to fire a few times. As a result, the noise of the shots attracted the attention of more infected. It was to be expected that, on hearing the shots, the zombies would begin to approach. Without stopping, the officer's eyes darted around as he tried to keep his cool. Upon spotting an abandoned bus, a great idea came up. Amid reflection, the protagonist concluded that running aimlessly might alert the infected even more, but he saw in the bus a safe refuge. Posted at the bus entrance, the captain ordered the protagonist to run and take shelter. Quickly, they both got into the bus and closed the door. They needed to check every seat for any hidden mutant. The tension was growing, showing that mutants had not given up and were gathering outside. Carefully watching the zombies at the entrance made the captain fear they had not been fast enough. Every second, the infected grew more desperate in their attempt to invade the bus. Noise and confusion brought even more zombies to the scene. During the effort to hold the door, the captain's strength was tested, but his arms could take no more. Quickly, the protagonist ran and easily reinforced the entrance's security. Next, the passage was blocked, preventing any infected from crossing. Such action gave the captain the freedom to coordinate the others. At that moment, the young man stated he would keep the door secure while the leader organized the others to break the windows and fight back. Immediately, leadership instincts emerged as the windows were shattered. Zombies surrounded the bus, trying to get in from all sides. Meanwhile, the survivors did everything possible to protect themselves with the weapons they had at hand. Many held onto a companion to minimize the damage caused by the attack. Noticing the large number of infected and a little ammunition, the captain's concern increased. At that instant, the protagonist called him and handed over a sort of harpoon. Soon after, the question of where he had found the weapon was vaguely answered. This tool allowed launching arrows in large numbers, making it difficult for the zombies to approach. After a while, the small horde was controlled, and the survivors were able to leave the vehicle. Accompanying them was a boy enthusiastic about the apocalyptic situation. Even so, the protagonist warned the young man to stay alert and not make mistakes due to carelessness. When night fell in the fort, a traitor offered to keep guard. In view of this, the chubby, bespectacled friend found the young man's readiness, known for his laziness, odd. At this moment, irritation overtook the boy, who defended himself, saying no one should question his decisions. Even so, the bespectacled young man did not understand his friend's sudden evasion. Meanwhile, the person in charge of the fort observed the argument in silence. In the end, they decided to let the young man stay on guard. The wait extended into the night when they finally were sure the old man was asleep. The old man always kept the ammunition cabinet key close to him. At this point, the traitor barely put in any effort to enter the room and find what he was looking for. He approached carefully to take the key without waking the old man. Moving stealthily, he reached out his hand, but at the moment he almost touched the object, the old man opened his eyes. Before any question could be asked, a punch hit the old man squarely in the face, preventing any reaction. Taking the opportunity, the traitor grabbed the key and fled without hesitation. Soon, the noise woke up all the fort inhabitants, who found out about what happened. Next, the old man mentioned that the ammunition cabinet key had been taken. The chase began. Everyone ran in an attempt to stop the escape. Desperately, Lu Miming knocked everything down along the way, creating obstacles to delay his pursuers. No one could believe he had truly betrayed the group. After a while, he stopped in front of the infirmary with a plan in mind. He believed his friend in treatment, already zombified, could be useful for his escape. Entering the place and seeing the boy's weakened state, he didn't hesitate to set him free. One of the restraints was already loose, further facilitating the release. As they reached the corridor, the others realized the situation and were outraged. It was hard to accept that someone had interrupted their friend's treatment. The order was given to surround the infected and ensure he couldn't cause damage. The group positioned around their transformed friend, who reacted little. It was surprising how easily they managed to immobilize him. Taking advantage of their control over him, they decided to lock him back in the infirmary. Pushed inside, he almost walked in on his own, which was puzzling. Watching through the window, everyone wondered why he wasn't resisting. The old man reflected on the wasted time while the traitor had already achieved his goal. Another member who had been observing everything wanted to understand the relationship between the elderly man and the young man he referred to as a brat. The traitor, finding only one weapon, wondered where the rest were. Still, he thought that one would be enough to handle any problem. He believed no one there was worthy of confronting him, as his only debt had already been paid. The old man regretted the ingratitude of some people who simply did not change. Meanwhile, the man in the infirmary remained motionless, but his veins throbbed intensely. It was evident that something out of the ordinary was happening with him. Far away, the captain was talking to the protagonist about the last intersection before the mansion. He left instructions that, after finding the rest of the group, they should head to Rongshan Garden. With that resolved, he left without hesitation. Thoughts about their separation didn't seem to weigh as much as they had expected. The captain was calm because he got warned about all the dangers along the way. The movement of the infected increased as the night advanced. In the building where the group was waiting for Zhang, impatience was growing. One of them stated he wouldn't wait any longer and would find the woman that same night. He believed that if she were alone among the infected, she likely wouldn't have survived. While he was devising his plans, the woman remained in the other room, cradling her son. The tall blonde advised caution because he didn't want her to die prematurely. The argument escalated as everyone wanted to assure their turn before it got too late. What they hadn't realized was the sudden silence of the infected ones downstairs. The tall blonde among them seemed to have heard something and went to check. With the noise, he thought it could be a rescue team. He didn't have much time to be sure of what it was. He was unable to keep his head on straight. In the woman's room, the others arrived, terrifying the young woman and instilling fear in her. One of them, with a sarcastic smile, ordered her to stop pretending. Terrified, she remained motionless when they pulled at her child's collar. For reacting, she received a slap to wake up. The young man was thrown aside to not bother. In tears, the boy outside closed his fist in anger. Even so, he was thrown further away for being inconvenient. When the door closed, he was terrified. A loud noise drew his attention. Seeing one of the henchmen fallen, he was even more scared. Shortly after, he saw someone's shadow, and it sent chills down his small body. The protagonist asked if he was Zhang's son. Scared, the boy just agreed. The woman was still crying, trying to be silent. This annoyed the guys, who wanted to hear her scream for more fun. Even though they didn't want to struggle, they agreed they would have fun by themselves. The game ended when someone kicked the door. They had little time to notice what was happening. The leader, thinking all that ruckus was coming from the boy, ordered to get rid of him. When he saw one of his own fallen on the floor, he was horrified. They asked what was happening. Without time to react, he took a punch in the face from the protagonist. With just one blow, he was thrown far away. Scared, he wanted to know who was that bastard that arrived out of nowhere. The answer was a kick in the face. Elsewhere, the traitor pointed a gun at the members of the fort. The old man told his granddaughter to obey the traitor and go to the mentioned room. Close to insanity, he said that without eliminating someone, he couldn't prove his authority. Decided to attack that old man, he wanted to warn the others. The granddaughter pleaded that he wouldn't do anything to her grandfather. While pointing the gun, a noise coming from inside the infirmary grabbed his attention. They found it strange, as the medical room should be locked. The zombified lad came out of it. It was impressive to see him using a key to open it. Looking at the traitor, he was drooling with his face veins bulging. He couldn't let a zombie who just used a key wander around, so he started to shoot towards it. He was startled to notice that the bullets didn't deter the zombie. When he was about to be attacked, he couldn't believe this could be happening. The traitor was quickly killed by that thirsty zombie. When the others arrived and noticed the scene, they couldn't believe it. The zombie also dragged the body of the former friend. No one knew what was happening, as the zombie was calm just moments ago. Suddenly, in an act of madness, it attacked its own friend. Even in front of the scene, they couldn't believe what was happening. The zombie picked up the key again and opened a room. He locked himself in with his friend's body and threw the key away. Everyone remained silent, looking at each other scared. Elsewhere, the protagonist had dealt with the henchmen who were in Zhang's apartment. He looked at the boy and asked him to come closer. The woman wanted to know what he planned to force her son to do. The protagonist simply repeated for the boy to come closer. Brave, the boy assured his mother everything was fine. The protagonist, with a cutting object in hand, instructed the boy to hold it. Pointing at the malefactors who had assaulted his mother, he ordered their elimination. The two thugs screamed in terror, begging that the kid wouldn't do anything to them. The respectful woman called the protagonist boss and insisted her son was just a child. The protagonist warned the woman that from that point, the little boy didn't exist anymore. He looked at the boy and said that now he was the only man capable of protecting his mother. He also affirmed that the boy needed to muster courage and deal with the animals who hurt his mother. With tears in his eyes, the boy was ready to take matters into his own hands. In an act of fury, he lashed out at his mother's two assailants and put an end to them. The mother, repeating her son's name, could barely believe he had the courage to do such a thing. The boy wanted to know if those villains had also ended his father. Without hesitation, the protagonist confirmed it. The boy, upon hearing this, threw the sharp object on the ground and ran into his mother's arms, crying. The woman, terrified, asked the young man to take her son with him. The protagonist made it clear that he would take the two with him, as he had promised this to Jiang. With this, each of the three grabbed something to use as a weapon before they departed. Once they were outside, the little boy was startled by the number of eliminated zombies. Curious, he asked who was strong enough to do that. The protagonist asked them not to stray too far. Hearing some noise, he asked the two to wait for a moment. He asked the woman if she knew the location of Rongshane Garden. She said it should be in the direction he was looking at. Meanwhile, in front of that building, some men were shouting that they wanted all the supplies and women inside. Inside the building, the survivors didn't know whether to fight or simply surrender. However, the captain was not willing to comply with the delinquents' desires. One of the two women thought they should go out and beg for the rest of the people to be spared. However, the other woman refused to go out and serve as a toy for their lust. The captain refused to do anything so stupid. The thugs outside believed the survivors had good weapons, but inside, their leader was also armed. They had a plan to cut off the water supply to the ground floor apartments. The protagonist, along with the woman and the child, were observing the scene. The little boy asked the protagonist if those men were also bad. Agitated, he replied yes. He explained that they were just as bad as those who had bullied the child and his mother. The captain asked them to wait on the stairs as he was going to watch what the scoundrels were doing down below. Crouched, he peered through the window to see if anything happened. He noticed that there were 7 enemies, and 3 of them were also armed. Suddenly, a flash and a deafening noise took over the place. He immediately crouched so as not to get hit. The explosion was terrifying and put many into a panic. Shortly after, the elimination began, one by one. With a few shots, several of them hit the ground. Even those who tried to retaliate didn't seem to be having any luck. The captain noticed through the window that it was the boy from before. The exchange of gunfire was intense, and some were still attempting to resist. The protagonist didn't show fear or mercy to anyone. While the thugs saw their companions fall, they still tried to resist with all their might. The protagonist simply walked slowly, without showing any fear. From a distance, he realized that those enemies were not mere amateurs. No one knew where that man had come from, advancing like a madman. While they crouched and shielded themselves, he simply kept moving forward. The apparent leader of the bandits was furious. He seemed to have been hit, and his accomplice was not helping. Under pressure, he decided to face the protagonist. The protagonist, however, just kept walking and shooting at them, knocking down another enemy. The man who was hiding thought the protagonist had run out of ammunition. In a moment of delusion or bravery, he left his hideout and pointed his gun at the protagonist. The protagonist dodged quickly, causing confusion in the enemy. Shortly afterwards, he immobilized him and, using the bandit's own weapon, was able to finish him off. In the end, only he remained standing in that place. After that, he began to rummage through the pockets of the fallen bodies. He walked into the building unconcerned, knowing that there were still enemies lurking. Even without looking directly, he knew exactly where they were and how many there were. After eliminating everyone, he once again gained the admiration of the little boy. Soon, an opportunity arose to recruit survivors from that building. Before anything, the protagonist wanted to know who those people were. The captain explained that they were the scum of Bikini Mountain, and that this place was located south of the city. Two young men arrived after the captain called them. They explained that this group was just a gang of gangsters with plenty of resources and weapons. The protagonist closed his eyes for a moment and remembered his past life. He recalled that Lai Shuxianong and Kui Jing were based in the south. He was sure it was them, so he asked if that was the only settlement in the south. The boys told him that this group destroyed half of the groups they encountered and only took the young and beautiful women. In light of this information, he had no more doubts. He knew they were the same men from his past life. The captain asked what the young man was talking about. The protagonist explained that those three leaders held powerful weapons. After that, he handed a loaded weapon to Captain Lee and asked them to wait there for a few more days. He would gather his forces and come back. The captain, however, warned that the enemies of Bikini Mountain were too strong, even for all of them combined. The captain suggested that the young man should look for a safer place and not worry about them. He also mentioned that he had already established a settlement in the old Chow market, where there were more people. Before leaving, he called Xiao Shuai and the child to go with him. They left for another place, which was heavily guarded. On the way, they observed what happened to the zombies that approached that place. Meanwhile, on Bikini Mountain, a meeting was taking place. The issue being debated was the delay in obtaining supplies, something that should have been resolved by now. A fat old man with a goatee assured that he had already sent people to take care of it. Another man at the meeting commented that they should also worry about capturing beautiful women. The man with the goatee, with an awkward smile, agreed with the idea. The leader of the meeting, a man with colored hair, made it clear that the fat man with the goatee had not yet completed any mission successfully. After this warning, the fat man with the goatee promised that this time he would carry out the mission. One of the goatee's subordinates asked if he was okay seeing the way he left the meeting. Ignoring the question, he just wanted to know if the 7 men he sent on the mission had already returned. When he found out that all of them had been eliminated easily, he couldn't understand how ordinary people had accomplished such a feat. Furious, he ordered that everyone who knew how to handle weapons be gathered. He wanted to take care of this matter himself. On the other hand, already at the fort, Shanshan was very happy to see Chief Yang. The protagonist, noting Lu Miming's absence, confirmed his suspicions. The traitor was indeed him. The girl was scared to realize that Chief Yang already knew this from the start. Pointing to the woman and the child, the protagonist asked his friend Chi to accommodate them and then take them to the infirmary. At the infirmary door, they questioned Chief Yang if he was already aware of the traitor's bad intentions. That's when he explained that he wasn't 100% certain, but he was suspicious. He explained that the only thing he was certain of was that one of Zhang Qi's friends was a traitor. After saying this, he handed over the weapon that the traitor had used to his friend, who was amazed. Looking at the gun's magazine, he noticed that all the bullets were rubber. The old man wanted to know more about the boy in the infirmary. The protagonist, under pressure, explained that he wasn't an ordinary zombie, but a rare mutant. Approaching the young zombie, the protagonist asked if he understood. Blink 3 times slowly. Seeing that the zombie understood, he asked a simple mathematical question for the zombie to answer by blinking. Then he explained that after the apocalypse, some infected had a small chance of becoming rare mutants. He noticed that Chen Chong was a rarity among the rare. Everyone was surprised to realize that the zombie understood what they were saying about him. Chen Chong even waved to everyone. The protagonist, seeing that the zombie had already taken care of the traitor, said they no longer needed to hold him. The zombie continued dragging the traitor. As he passed by, she asked if he still remembered them. Chen Chong looked at the friend, growled a few times, but did not show hostility. The friends, the blonde and the fat man, watched everything carefully. To prove that he still remembered, the zombie made a gesture that only they would recognize. The friend realized that, even zombified, Chen Chong still couldn't keep his hands to himself. Lying down resting, the protagonist analyzed his achievements on the screen. One of them was the acquisition of a mutant companion. Looking at the store, he got excited as it was the first time a level 2 box appeared. However, it was very expensive, costing 50 points. He unlocked 2 boxes as he felt they were absolutely necessary. In them, he got an interdimensional infection blocker, which gave him the chance of a supernatural mutation. He was super excited about his new achievements, but had doubts about the infection blocker. Looking at the system window, he saw that there was still an ongoing mission to rescue the survivors from Rongsang Garden. Meanwhile, from the top of the fort, the zombie threw the traitor out. After that, the protagonist organized a shooting training for everyone. He made it clear that everyone should practice at least 1 hour a day. Then he asked old Shengbo to prepare Zhang Qi and the others. They were going to retrieve a group of survivors. He also called Chen Chong. The two of them went in search of a large vehicle to transport the survivors. They found a bus full of zombies and quickly solved the problem. There was still a zombified driver, but Chen Chong took care of him. The protagonist took the keys and handed them to the mutant. Chen Chong, somewhat suspicious, accepted the key. Boss Yanong explained that when they were alone, he wouldn't need to use the mouth restraint. Understanding the level of trust that the protagonist had in him, Chen Chong removed the restraint that kept people safe around him. In another location, the group set to go to Rongsan Garden was already prepared. The bearded man could not believe they still hadn't managed to take the garden. Therefore, this time he decided to go with the group himself. Zombies still littered the path ahead. Nevertheless, at a reasonable speed, the protagonist was driving the bus, running over them, forcing others out of their way to continue progressing. Meanwhile, on the 8th floor of the garden building, survivors waiting to be recruited were having a meal. An excited young man heard car noise and thought it might be Boss Yanong. However, the captain asked everyone to remain silent and chose to check the situation himself. Outside, the bearded man's group was preparing to invade. Lai signaled that they were moving now. From up high, through a window, the captain noticed that those sorry souls were back. Song could not believe they hadn't learned their lesson from the last time. Despite everything seeming different now, the captain warned that they needed to be careful, as they didn't know exactly what was going on. They needed a position with a good view to stop the invasion. When Lai with the beard and his group positioned themselves to begin shooting, they were shocked to find that the survivors' weapons were more effective than they imagined. They were ready for a fight with no time for games. From the window, Song asked a boy to duck down and beware of the splinters. Lai with the beard requested a loudspeaker. With the megaphone in hand, he tested to see if it was working. Yet he didn't have time to address anyone because right behind him, one of his companions was hit in the head. Not only those close by were frightened, but also the others in the group. They didn't expect the survivors to have a long-range weapon. They had no idea when they had managed to get one. Meanwhile, the captain, positioned up high, was picking off the enemies to prevent them from entering. No matter how much Lai with the beard thought, nothing made sense. How did they get their hands on a rifle? They asked him what they should do, following his orders when the henchman fired without giving it a second thought. However, before he could get very far, he was stopped. Lai with the beard didn't care. On the contrary, he thought that man served as a warning to the others. He ordered everyone to wait for the count of 3 and burst out shooting. Lai was just watching, trying to time the trajectory of the shots. This gave him enough time to strategize. When he thought everything was ready, he too started running. From the roof, the captain aimed at the group, but did not shoot at Lai with the beard. However, the 4th man in the group wasn't as lucky and was left behind, becoming an easy target. The group's pickup truck sped up to escape as quickly as possible. At the same time, the bus driven by the protagonist was coming full throttle, with the mutant inside. At one point, the bus and the pickup truck passed each other on the road. The protagonist thought he recognized someone in the truck, but decided it wasn't the time to think about it. He parked the bus near the location to pick up the survivors, realizing that the rifle he had left behind had significantly helped them. Behind him, the mutant was salivating hungry. The protagonist noticed and asked him if he was hungry. After that, he let him eat. The mutant rejoiced because Chen Chong hadn't eaten yet. The protagonist said that after he had his meal, they should meet him at Complex 8. He then left, allowing the mutant to eat in peace. Considering it was his first meal in that way, Chen Chong tasted something different and intense. The protagonist walked past the fallen henchman. From the top of the building, the group noticed someone approaching. When they saw it was Xiaoyong, they called him. They came down the building to talk, and without delay, the protagonist asked if it was them who had dealt with the gang. The officer confirmed and said that it was thanks to the weapon given by the protagonist, adding that he was a specialist in handling rifles. A loud snarl frightened everyone there, except for the protagonist, who turned his attention to the source of the growl without any concern. From not too far, a zombie was approaching. The group already had their weapons ready to end the threat. Recognizing his zombie, Xiaoyong told everyone to relax, for the creature was with him. With slight fear remaining, the officer asked if the creature was really a companion. With the intention of evolving the zombie with the dead bodies, the protagonist commanded the zombie to consume them. Surprised, the policeman asks if the protagonist can speak to those creatures. He states that it's not quite like that and instructs the group to get on the bus, as he would explain along the way. In a hurry to leave, the protagonist tells the zombie to eat quickly and get on the bus. After consuming the bodies, he puts on a mask. Then he heads for the bus. One of the group members was surprised to see the zombie put on the mask itself. The MC teases the guy, saying he shouldn't criticize the creature out loud, as this might annoy it. Very slowly, the zombie gets on the bus. His strength and weight cause the vehicle to tilt slightly. This leaves the police officer perplexed. The zombie hands the key to the MC and keeps repeating key. Xiaoyong asks the zombie if it can now speak, but the zombie just repeats key. In thought, the MC says that after eating 6 deceased, the zombie Chang Chong is starting to evolve. He also thinks he needs to hurry to convert these points into the greatest strength of the settlement. They speed up the bus to get there as quickly as possible. Scene changes to the enemy base where Lai is being reprimanded for failing. He tries to explain, telling them that those seemingly ordinary people had automatic rifles. Zhang Lin says that small-town cops don't have such weaponry. Fat Li tries to explain to the boss that he is indeed correct and that someone can be sent to verify. Too tired to listen to excuses, one of the men there kicks him. Without means to contest and no more to do, Fat Li quietly retreats. Unsatisfied with just kicking Fat Li, the man expresses his tiredness of that useless one. Furthermore, now that Lai was understaffed, it was a good time to get rid of him. The old man, understanding the game, openly says that the impatient one just wants Fat Li's woman. Even more malicious, he says to old Xu and Boss Lin to regard the woman as a belonging of the three. Not to disappoint them, Boss Lin says he will find an opportunity first. Fat Li overhears all the conspiracy from outside the room. He's infuriated but can't do much about it. Now he's back in his quarters, wrecking stuff and overturning furniture. His wife asks what's wrong and tells him to calm down. He explains it's no longer safe here and they need to plan a quick escape. Fat Li calls a subordinate, who promptly complies. Lai orders him to gather the personnel at midnight. As he explains everything, that unreliable woman listens in the background. The bus arrives at the MC's base. Gradually, the group exits the vehicle. With the new survivors officially recruited, MC's mission is complete. Addressing the zombie, the protagonist warns that they will head for the South District tomorrow night. Interested in the subject, the cop asks why the MC is going to the South District. Xiaoyong says he has unresolved issues that need to be settled with Bichi Village. Later, in his room, he opens the system. He looks at what he's going to buy, successfully buys a level 2 high-tech supply box for 50 points. The box is opened, and the obtained item presents a plus 20 stamina potion. The item satisfies Xiaoyong greatly, expecting nothing less from a level 2 box. Xiaoyong injects the potion into himself. Now with 33 stamina points, he says he has 6 times more than an average person. He notices a fly buzzing around. He grabs the insect with his fingertips, examines the being in his hands without killing it, for having a lot of precision and control. He releases the fly after testing his own reflexes. Later, he passes by the base where some of the inhabitants are practicing shooting. As he walks, the cop asks if Xiaoyong already heads for the southern part of the town. He confirms, and the cop asks about instructions. The answer is straightforward. He should teach everyone how to shoot. The cop, quite experienced, ensures that he will complete the task. Xiaoyong calls Chang Chong to proceed on the journey. They leave the base sped up in the bus. Now Fat Li's meeting takes place. He remains with all his remaining personnel. A car pulls up there. The lights of the headlamp dazzle their eyes. Old Settler shows up armed at the front of the car, and the goons position themselves around. In the car are the other traitors. Fat Li and his subordinates are not ready for this. Mockingly, old Xu questions where Lai is headed. He thinks for a moment before answering, using the excuse that he takes the advantage of the night to attack Rongshan Garden. The old man feigns interest, not believing the excuse. A henchman throws a body at Fat Li's feet. Li's assistant lies motionless, and the subordinate next to him recognizes and calls for him. The Fat Li strikes his subordinate for talking too much. Then he pretends he did not know the deceased. Without showing any interest, the old man raises his gun, and his henchmen open fire. The sounds of the shots echo. Fat Li shrinks back, frightened. Upon noticing that he remains unharmed, he opens his eyes. The scene before him reveals all his fallen subordinates. He insists that he was unaware of any betrayal. Old Fat orders him to observe well who is inside the car. Fat Li looks into the vehicle. The vision reveals something he would rather not see. The woman who was supposed to be his wife is in another man's arms. The revelation arrives bluntly. Kui Jing really exposed his plan. Fat Li raves about her betrayal. Boss Jean receives the question about Li's fate. The answer comes with a single finger signal. The order becomes clear. Fat Li is hanged by the neck. There he remains, exposed to all. Walking with his bus, Xiaoyong arrives in the region. He skulks along with Chen Chong. They pass by the place where Fat Li hangs. Xiaoyong stops near him and gestures for Chen Chong to keep quiet. Observing the situation, he expresses a desire to be the one to deal with Fat Li. With precision, he throws a stone. The rope breaks. Fat Li plummets headfirst onto the ground. An idea emerges in Xiaoyong's mind. He claims he will help Li get revenge. Inside the house, in one of the rooms, Kui Jing is tied up and devoid of clothes. The bosses enjoy the situation. Akai is done and is getting dressed. He hears a sound from outside and approaches the window to check. Looking at the view below, he observed a terrible scene. The henchmen were inert on the ground. A knock on the bedroom door diverted everyone's attention. At the same time, the protagonist breaks into the room through the window. With a sharp object in hand, he presses the cold blade against the man's neck, who had no way to protect himself. The protagonist slides the cutting object across that frail neck, which ended up being torn. Akai collapsed on the floor, lifeless. With a quick throw, the protagonist launched the cutting object, which pierces Zhang Lin's throat, killing him instantly. The still naked body fell to the floor and remained there. Kui Jing asked what the protagonist was trying to do. Swift with mockery, Xiaoyong commented that she seemed to be having fun, and added that he was imagining what Fat Li's reaction would be when he sees her. She asked if he was referring to Lei Shuxiang, already anticipating what would happen next. The protagonist opened the door, and Fat Li, in an altered state, entered enraged. He lunged at the wretch, who was already crying. The shameless traitor begged the protagonist for forgiveness, but it was too late. While Fat Li devours her, the protagonist left the room, closing the door, leaving Kui Jing inside to be consumed. Outside the house, now with Chen Chong, the protagonist ordered the mutant to devour the fallen bodies around. He understood and went to fulfill the order. Feeling something around, the protagonist scanned the area. Using his hearing ability, he perceived something a little distant. In another corner there, inside a closed room, some people were crouched on the floor. A man, apparently a cook, entered the location. He was fat and seemed to have bad intentions. Another man, a helper, pulled a little girl as if choosing an animal to be taken. Looking unsatisfied, the cook commented that she was too thin. He pointed to a bigger boy and said that it should be him. With a pleased expression, he claimed the boy was more suitable as he was bulkier. The boy's mother pleaded to spare her son. Annoyed, the cook threw her on the floor. Even fallen and in tears, she kept begging for her son's life. She tried to ask the people there for help, but no one was willing to risk it. Footsteps and gunshots drew everyone's attention in the room. The cook wondered who would be there. He asked his subordinates if it was the sound of a shotgun, but one of them mentioned that only the boss had one, making it unlikely. The little boy ran into his mother's arms, who was relieved not to have lost her son. The door was opened from the outside, making everyone more apprehensive. Not wanting to expose himself, the cook ordered one of the minions to go check it quietly. Without being able to question, he set off with a weapon in his hands. At the same time, the arm of a being grabbed him, quickly dragging him outside. The other armed minions prepared to shoot. They fired at the door, walls, and windows, vainly trying to hit the agile silhouette outside. Chen Chong entered through one of the windows. He jumped on the cook. He firmly grabbed his head. Then he twisted it until it broke. As soon as he landed, he went after the others. They cried out for help, but it was futile. Chen Chong eliminated all of them. The innocent survivors questioned why the being had helped them. Pleased with Chen Chong's performance, the protagonist commented that he was impressive and agile. The being claimed to be elegant and skillful, but the simple act of speaking scared the survivors there. People there couldn't help but fear the zombie. The MC assures everyone that they will not be attacked. A little girl says that zombies are super monsters that attack what they see in front of them. He listens to the girl, unsurprised by the answer. Bending down to look the girl in the eyes, the MC asks if she had ever seen such a creature before. The girl's mother replies that they had seen zombies in the decoration market of the eastern city. Xiaoyong didn't expect the zombies to have overtaken that area so quickly, and also the appearance of rare mutants, he says, looking at Chen Chong. He explains that mutants have some levels of rationality and memory, making them much more efficient. Chen Chong asks if this also applies to him. The protagonist affirms that Chen Chong is a rare mutant. Xiaoyong asks everyone if there is anyone else, and they reply that there are people trapped in a sales office and in the basement. Then the MC goes with them to rescue the remaining survivors. He slowly opens the basement door. Inside, the scene was terrible. Zhang Lin's staff was capturing survivors from nearby and slaughtering them there. That was the reason for the lack of settlements in the south of the city. Not understanding the reason for so much slaughter, he asks if it was all for food. He had a rough idea of how many enemies were there in total and knew it was too much meat for them. The MC asks about the sales office. The man says it is located near the south gate. He also explains that captives are initially brought there to be slaughtered later. A system mission appears for the MC with a reward of 20 points. The scene shifts to the sales office. Hearing gunfire, a guard asks where it's coming from. The other says they are practicing shooting at people. Zombie Chen Chong falls from the roof behind them, ending their lives very quickly. Inside the office, some naked women are huddled together. They hear the guards being taken out. Not wanting to die there after so much suffering, they hope they are not next. The door slowly opens. The women are already desperate, not knowing what to do. But the one who enters is the protagonist, calm as ever. He just tells them all to come with him. They go through the whole office, the group led by the MC. A survivor asks if the protagonist is really going to take them to a safe place. He says yes, but everyone has to work and help in some way. The group is all excited and ready to contribute. Xiaoyong tells them not to waste time and follow him. He puts everyone on his bus, and they leave from there. They disembark from the bus outside the base. Meng Shanshan says to open the door, but Jiang Xiaoyong says that the MC didn't go straight in, so it's better to wait. The MC tells the survivors that this is the fortress, but he can't let them in yet. He says that they will stay in the outdoor cabins for now, protected by an iron fence. He adds that, over time, they will renovate the unfinished buildings and improve the conditions there. The next morning, the other gang members go to look for the people of Bikshi village, with cargo in a truck and other vehicles. In one of the cars, a woman is grumbling. She wonders what Jiang is up to. Already noticing that something around there isn't right, she goes into one of the rooms to check. What she sees irritates her. Zombified Zhang, Akai, and Fat Lai. They notice her enter the room. They attack her like beasts. She knocks Fat Lai to the floor with a punch and slices the other zombies without difficulty. She cleans the cutting object. One of her subordinates says that now that Jiang has passed away, they will deal with the meats. The woman says they will have to deal with it from now on, and will eliminate whoever stands in her way. They continue walking through Bikshi village, finding deceased thugs on the ground. The subordinate informs that no survivors were left. She asks about the meat, and he says it's still there. So the woman orders to bring the vehicle to load the meat. Other thugs load the truck with black bags. After observing the surroundings, the woman notices something. A very big and evident track of tires. Normal marks wouldn't mean much, but the size of these ones indicates that someone drifted with a large vehicle. In his fortress base, the MC was looking at a system mission. He considers that he has enough land thanks to that snob who underestimated him that time. Think about what to do next while you're still up there, looking at everything from above. Walk to the base with Jiang Xiaoyong and Shanshan. The new members of the base call you a savior. Those people thank him on their knees, even though the protagonist says it's not necessary. Turning to another woman, he asks where exactly she had seen the super mutant. The woman said it was at the Huiwanfa decoration market, while looking for supplies. The group was attacked and ended up separating while fleeing with her daughter, until they came across the people of Villa Bikshi. Apparently, the protagonist plans to go there. Shanshan tells Xiaoyong they have plenty of supplies and don't need to deal with the monster. Ignoring that, the protagonist says the more, the better, and the place where the monster is close by. And if left alive, the mutant would threaten everyone's safety. The woman who mentioned the mutant asks her savior not to go. The protagonist says he knows what he's doing. He orders Jiang Xiaoyong to call Uncle Chang because they are going to face it. In front of the decoration department, a group arrived to collect supplies. That group intended to quickly grab supplies and go. One of them said the place could have been looted already, but the group leader said there is always something left in large places. The group is optimistic because they can handle zombies with some tranquility. They enter carrying pots, axes, crowbars, iron bars, and other melee weapons. They look at the shelves. All close to the entrance are empty. The woman bangs a pot against a wall. Then yelling, she asks if anyone was there. She was apprehensive because she didn't know what to expect. Some zombies, attracted by the sound, go towards them, about to attack those people. Sounds of pounding echo throughout the large market. Even with weak appearance, they had an easy time defeating zombies. Given the small number, it is likely that most of the zombies have been eliminated by other groups. That not-so-subtle entrance attracted the attention of those who shouldn't have noticed. The specialist mutant was looking stealthily, fiercely waiting for a good moment to act. He was minimally intelligent and would not attack the group while they were attentive. Those people kept looking between the shelves for supplies. The woman Wanwan found something that interested her a lot. A large bed that seemed comfortable to her. She throws herself on it, enjoying a moment. They had good supplies and beds there, which made them consider settling there. In another corner of the large market, two of the group members ventured off to smoke. Thinking about the option of staying there, the more calculating man said the place was hard to defend and could attract others. But he saw a small building that looked nice nearby. Before he could finish speaking, he was already dead. With its large claws embedded in the man, the mutant says the fresh meat was great. The other guy runs and screams for help, scaring the group, who had no idea what was happening. Before he could get any further, the extra was killed. The zombie lifted him into the air with its claws, and split the man into two in front of the group. Wanwan had a good look before she had the strength to run. She runs as fast as she can. The rest of the group also. But the mutant zombie, who was not very friendly, continued chasing the people. Wanting to live for another day, Wanwan runs faster. She continues to run until it's just her. She sees the exit in front of her getting closer and closer. She knows she's almost there and tries to keep going. But she falls and, exhausted, can no longer run away. The mutant is in front of her. Scared and crying, she tries to defend herself with her arms. Looking at Chen Chong, she says she doesn't want to die. But seeing the zombie pass by without attacking her, she's confused. Suddenly, she hears a voice telling her not to be scared. Looking at the protagonist, she seems to recognize him, until she remembers that it was he who bought the property. Helping her to stand up, he seems to remember her too. He asks if her name is Ning Wanwan, but she remembers the monster and says they have to run. the protagonist says they're already dealing with the monster. Even so, she seems to be very scared. What she sees is making the young woman worried. The hulking mutant thought glory should be shared among them. The protagonist asks Chen Chong if he can do it by himself, and Chong says he'll try. Then he pushes the zombie back. The mutant says it's good to meet another of the same species, and he launches to deliver an attack that broke the floor and almost hit Chong. Prepping another attack, he wonders if eating another of his kind will make him evolve faster. But without a chance to dodge, a punch was coming his way, which makes him have his head buried. The big man was caught off guard by the rival's fighting power. Without letting him get up, Chong raises his leg to attack. He swings down his leg, striking with all his might. But he notices something and looks up. His enemy was no longer in the strike zone. From the ceiling, the mutant says he can finally use the power he accumulated from hunting. Still looking at his opponent, Chong is taken aback, for the mutant was already in front of him. They fought at such a high speed that only flashes of light could be seen. Jiang asks how that mutant could be so strong, and the protagonist says that if he hadn't come today, he would have become a significant problem. He draws his gun, which greatly surprises the girl standing behind him. The protagonist tells Chong that he will need to hold off the big guy for a second. He holds the mutant. With the enemy immobilized, the protagonist shoots, and then the mutant was hit right in the forehead. That made him recoil backward, but he gets up and says it hurt and he will destroy them. Jiang, shocked, asks how he took a shot to the head and is still alive. But the protagonist, undeterred by the apparent lack of reaction, shoots even more, taking it in the chest. The big guy just keeps laughing like a madman. Looking at the mutant's body on the ground, Jiang asks if he really is dead. The protagonist asks Chong if he isn't going to try to eat the mutant to get stronger. Observing the mission requirements, he saw that everything counts. But not wasting opportunities, he says that since they are there, they would clean the supermarket. Using his spatial ring, he stores everything he sees. His friend asks what kind of magic is this. Looking at the bodies on the ground, he asks Chong if he is full. A white car was driven at high speed. Meanwhile, the woman asks if he saw something. With the binoculars, he observes the watchtower, and where most people from the base lived. He says they have a good number of people and old weapons, and says the only advantage is that the base is well built. The two talked about the attack their partners had suffered. They say the heavens are on their side, giving them new prey and a base. The driver asks if they should move now, and the woman replies that they should bring more people and weapons first. With that, they make a retreat in the white car. In the black car, the protagonist is returning to base. Inside the car, Wan asks if it's true. Jiang says it's true, and they even have hot water and mattresses. The protagonist, after noticing something on the road, asks them to take out their weapons, which Jiang does quickly. At one point on the road, the cars pass close to each other. The protagonist looks into the car and sees the woman. She also stares back, and suddenly, a new mission is announced. His new mission was to resist the invasion, and the reward would be 50 points. The protagonist wonders if it was that person who passed by him. While thinking about this, they arrived at the base. With it always being watched over, he comes asking Shanshan if anyone suspicious had approached the base. She answers that a car passed by and asks if it was something serious. He immediately asked her to gather everyone because he had something critical to announce. In a place in the southern suburb of the factory, a group of extras listen to something on the radio. When the survivors hear that someone nearby had a base and needed more hands to work, one of them says it must be close by, but suddenly they see a car and wave to it. With that, the car stopped. Stepping out of the car, the woman asks if they came because of the transmission, and they promptly confirm. Seeing the size of the kind woman's heart, the extra blushes. That woman approaches him. She says they arrived in time and asks to follow her. She adds that it's close by, but that the guy is full, so they should go on foot. Arriving at the base, they could see zombie bodies scattered around. The group of survivors were impressed with the size of the place. Embarrassed, one of them says he was going to step out for a while and would soon return. The woman quickly tells him he doesn't need to go out, as there was a bathroom in the base, and asks him to follow her. Following the woman, the extra could relieve himself. He also noticed that she watched him. After finishing, he adjusts his clothes. While still pulling up his pants, he tells the woman that she doesn't need to be shy. But shortly after, he starts feeling bad and begins to choke. It was the woman who quickly stabbed him. His body drops lifeless to the ground. Afterwards, she complains because she thought he was first-rate. Coming out of the bathroom, her subordinate says everything's ready, and she asks to bring the one from the bathroom as well. She adds to call the second and the third brothers. Already around a big table, there is the protagonist and his friends. The captain wanted to know who was after them, but the protagonist still didn't know. He tells Jiang and Chong to come with him because they will clean a nearby building for refugees. Shanshan and Xiao Kai also offer to go together. The other two want to help. Being brave, the little boy wants to help the protagonist, which frightens his mother. The woman from the property agency felt obligated to offer help. The protagonist believes that place is no longer safe and they should relocate to protect the members. The chosen ones followed him to complete the plan. Already in front of the place, they were prepared. There were many zombies, and they all had to face the enemy. Some attacked even with fear. The MC asks everyone to check if they were injured, and soon everyone said they were unharmed. He says that in the coming days, they should wait for the attack and stay there. But everyone wanted to fight and contribute. Thinking about the strategy, he says that this was good. He tells them to clean out the place where they communicated via walkie-talkies and follow his orders. While the men load the truck in some cars, someone calls the woman, and she looks back. One of them asks how it went, and the other says they need special meat. He says the Bikushin base has been wiped out, and now they have to find their own food. Again, one of them asks who did this, and the other says that without meat, he will go crazy. The woman says she has a group with several members, and that tomorrow she will take the second brother and some men to finish them off. Inside his room, the MC says that there are still 46 points left, and that he's going to take a look at the system. Looking carefully at the boxes, he is surprised that there are 2 level 2 boxes. After buying the Skill Awakening box, he gains a new power to increase stats by 25%, but after it's done, he'll suffer weakness. Looking at the new ability, he is happy that he can now be 8 times stronger than a normal person, and says that he can't wait to use it. Elsewhere, they rushed out, some cars and motorcycles. In the car, the subordinate asks Rue for orders, and she says to remind everyone of the strategy first to eliminate the refugees. And when number 2 is breaking the gate, they should provide cover and suppressive fire. Number 2 says he was hungry, and that he was going to slaughter and eat. In a hurry, they were racing fast. In another place, from the top of a building, Captain Lai says the place is hidden, but the view is not so good. The MC says they weren't there for the view. Surprised, he asks why they are there then. The MC replies asking if he hadn't said that he worked as a sniper for a few years. He says it was only a few months, but he is immediately confronted with the question if he can shoot up to 200 meters. Beating his chest, he says not to insult him and that, if it's not too windy, he can shoot up to 500 meters. The MC says that's perfect, but was soon interrupted by someone saying the equipment was there. It was Zhang Qi complaining about the weight of the equipment. Upon hearing this, the MC decided to check the box. Shocked by the content, Captain Lai yelled that it was a Barrett. Looking in the boxes, he noticed everything was correct. The captain, upon looking at the content, heard the MC tell him that they only had 2 magazines in total. When the captain put his hand on the weapon, he was satisfied and said he understood. The protagonist, out of the corner of his eye, saw that his friend had arrived and warned him to stay alert as the enemy could attack. The beautiful Shenshin informs that she saw something unusual. With the captain positioned, he responds that he has already seen. It was the enemy's attack. Meanwhile, intruders from afar noted the lack of some of the refugees. The woman warned that, at that distance, if they were spotted, it would be hard to fight back. With that, the cars sped on. Shenshin alerts that the enemy is now in sight. With that, everyone who was armed began to open fire. However, the cars were zigzagging, trying to dodge the shots. But one of the cars was hit, and the driver lost control, leaving that car out of control to eventually collide. The woman was irritated because she noticed that she had been spotted by the enemy. Everyone wanted answers about the situation. Even so, they approached closer and closer, trying to hide from the open fire. The big enemy didn't care what was happening. With his blade, which could cut through steel, he tried to break down the gate. The young girl noticed that someone was trying to break down the door. They opened fire in that direction, trying to prevent the worst. But the enemy also had her mercenaries. Someone was trying to defend themselves. However, the chubby man with glasses ended up being hit in the shoulder. They also noticed that their firepower was equivalent to theirs. They shouldn't be afraid. The right thing would be to hold the position. Old Bo noticed that they were cutting the main gate. The protagonist, hearing this, says they could relax because he had a plan. With this, he opened a gate. Shortly after, he ran in one direction. The enemy was furious because she had already used half of her ammunition and nothing had happened. I wanted to know from the big guy if he had finished knocking down the gate, and he warned that it was almost done. Suddenly, a loud noise scared everyone. It was the gate that had been opened. The order was to support the gate and not let anyone in. The enemy, apparently annoyed with the sheep jumping on her face, wanted to know how they would react. Her orders were that everyone take cover behind the big guy. The huge man, looking like an animal, was almost managing to open the gate. The protagonist was talking to Captain Lei to stay alert and wait for his signal. Then he asked if he was seeing the big guy. The captain already had him in his sights. That immense man, a wild beast. Some members of the fort, when confronted with that creature, believed that he could be a human. He was entering through the gate, with the crowd using him as a shield. He was receiving shots aimed at him, as if they were nothing. It's not that the bullets were not hitting, they just lacked the capacity to pierce his skin. Moreover, it was observed that he had very high regenerative power. The enemy thought they were scared, as it was their first time seeing such a monster. The captain had already noticed from far away that the big man had healing abilities. Therefore, he shot everything at him. The big man even lost his initial head. With the impact, his body fell to the ground. His team was terrified, as this was the first time they saw him falling. The enemy did not know how those useless people had managed to get their hands on such potent weapons. The protagonist appeared behind them, throwing fire. With the noise, they all retreated and ran. They noted that they had miscalculated and underestimated the strength of the enemy. The order from the enemy was for them to run quickly to the vehicle. The expression on her face was of complete hatred, with her veins bulging and her eyes furious. However, the protagonist disagreed about allowing any of them to escape. The woman knew precisely who that boy had been in those days. She pulled one of her own to serve as a shield for her. Acting quickly, she prevented the attack and was not hit by any of the bullets. The protagonist noted that the reaction speed of that woman was incredible. She was also an evolved one. The woman even threw her companion in the protagonist's direction, who simply ducked to avoid being hit. He needed to move quickly to manage to escape. However, she was already in Captain Lee's sights. He knew that, both in heaven and on earth, his aim was certain, and he hit one of the culprit's legs. Shortly thereafter, the female enemy fell to the ground. The captain was upset as he realized he had missed the direction and the aim. The female enemy was still alive and managed to be rescued by her friends, who threw her in the car and drove off at high speed. Watching the scene, the protagonist knew that if they came back seeking revenge later, it wouldn't be an issue. His status bar was high, and he had gained some points. His power was so cheated that he already knew where they were headed. After seeing that they had managed to fend off the enemy, everyone at the base was pretty pleased. They were pleased because they had had no fatalities on their side, only a few injuries. They would then go looking for the refugees hidden in the abandoned building. The protagonist, looking at the status message, was pleased to have gained 76 points. At the enemy base, the white car arrived with the few who had survived the attack. They could hardly believe when they saw that there were only 3 left, and the enemy was still injured in the leg. They wanted to know what had happened so seriously for her to have so many injuries. The woman said they were careless, as they did not think the enemies would have such heavy weapons. Annoyed, she ordered some meat to be brought to her, as she needed to replenish her energies. However, the man did nothing, just stared at her silently. Even so, she repeated that they should not stand still and get moving. She also said they were worth nothing. The man was upset because the woman had arrived in that state, but still had the nerve to talk to him that way. The woman couldn't believe the man was rebelling against her. Furious, she ordered the 2 men who were with her to take him down. When she saw that they did nothing, she looked back and noticed that they just stood there silently. The man told her that the rules had changed. Number 2 was down, and she injured. This made him the strongest one there. Also, everyone didn't like the way she treated people. She noticed everyone was rebelling. She threatened them, saying she could take care of everyone. However, within the next minute, she was already cornered by them. The blonde man looked like he wanted to give her a lesson with his own hands. That woman was clearly disliked in that group. They gathered and struck her several times. They only stopped when they were certain that she would never react again. With this, the thin, blonde man took the lead. After that, one of his subordinates referred to him as the 3rd boss. This caused great discomfort to the leader at the time. The man, realizing he'd gone too far, scratched his head and apologized, regretting his mistake. The man came to the conclusion that losing the 1st and 2nd bosses in other battles was very bad. Now they were trembling at the thought of encountering that man again, whom they called Tentacle Man. But the boss didn't mind, saying they could seek refuge in the West Steel Group. When the MC and his companions arrived at a certain location, his friend Che was astonished when he realized exactly what this place was, a base. However, he asked his friend to enter quietly and not to make so much noise. They looked at the ground and saw the enemy that had been exterminated and left behind. Captain Lee found it strange that they slaughtered their own companions, but the protagonist saw nothing unusual in this. Che asked Boss Yang if the big guy they faced was their zombie friend. They talked about the evolvers, and Captain Lei wanted to know more about them. The protagonist said that to become one, it was necessary to start feeding. The two, having heard the protagonist's words, found it very strange. Therefore, the MC explained again that to become an evolver and gain zombie abilities, they would need to feed on humans. They were scared and asked if, to survive the apocalypse, they would also have to eat humans. To reassure them, the MC warned that, although this was a more direct method, it was not the only way. He showed something that looked like a red stone, which scared them even more, wanting to know what it was. He said that in the end, be it an evolver or a zombie, all were mutants. He added that as the disasters intensified, even the zombies might have a chance to form cores. The captain thought they should eat zombie meat, but Chi made it clear that he was out of this. The MC explained that only mutants like Chen Chong could get stronger by consuming zombies. As he spoke, he announced that the mission to invade the base and eliminate the enemies was complete. As he was checking, a zombie tried to attack him. Very agile, he managed to get rid of it quickly. Then he checked if it had the core. His suspicions were correct. It too had a core, and the hunt was just beginning. With 2 cores in his hand, he offered one to each of them. Chai refused to consume it and asked Uncle Lai to do so. Captain Lade, with the 2 cores in his hand, began to sweat. but also wanted to get stronger. So without thinking too much, he put the 2 gems in his mouth at once. Instantly, there seemed to be some change in him. Showing off his arm full of protruding veins, he exclaimed that the sensation was incredible. Even though he was stronger, the protagonist warned him that now that he had become an evolver, he was still not strong enough. He also announced that the crisis was over and they should return. Meanwhile, at the West Steel plant, the surviving small group was recruiting reinforcements. As soon as they arrived, they were noticed and a man asked them to stop. But the intruder identified himself, saying he was the 3rd boss of the coal plant. Slightly suspicious, the man said he would let the leader know the man was there. After that, they went on to speak with the leader. A tall, bald man asked what the 3rd leader was doing there. He, feeling embarrassed, explained that he had been attacked and in order to cover for the other 2, they didn't survive. The bald leader genuinely felt sorry for the loss. He asked them to escort the 3rd boss and the brothers from the coal plant to a safe place. Meanwhile, the bald leader secluded himself in a corner, talking to another person. They were already settled when one of the subordinates referred to the 3rd leader as the 3rd brother. However, that man just wanted to express that he had a peculiar feeling about the place. He asked them to look around and notice how secured the place was, with bars on doors and windows, almost like a prison. As he spoke, a man with a threatening countenance barged in. He ordered them to get out and follow him. All complied with his request, gathered together, and waited for them. The 3rd leader asked the big leader what was happening. However, it was the woman who replied, asking what should be the fate of those who betrayed their own leader. He spoke to the 2 of them, saying there must be some mistake, since he hadn't done anything. The woman, being considerate, wanted him to depart from world knowing about his transgression. The big brother told the small mouse that he had been to the coal plant. That boss had a reasonable explanation for the fact that the rat had turned against its leaders. This made the boy feel hurt, saying they were all speculations and there were no evidences. The bald boss found the 3rd leader's face funny when he asked for evidence. Soon after, he gave the order that everyone should be eliminated. One of the subordinates of the 3rd boss pleaded to be spared, offering some information in exchange. The possibility of obtaining information caught the woman's attention. Taking advantage of this, the young man revealed that there was a settlement in the east of the city, with many people and many supplies. Upon hearing this, the woman wanted to know if the strength of this settlement could be compared to theirs. This made the leaders imagine it could represent a future threat. However, the young man affirmed that the camp didn't know how to become evolutionary. The man in the center of all seemed interested in the conversation about becoming an evolver. The most intriguing thing was how they had been defeated if the enemy did not even have an evolver. After saying all that, the boy looked at the woman and asked if his information had been useful. She just absorbed the data, but the order to eliminate them was still ongoing. Therefore, they did not understand how they could be executed even after giving information. After a few seconds of noise, the base calmed down. The 2 bosses agreed that a threat of that level should be contained. With this, they asked for a group to collect more information. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the protagonist was grinning from ear to ear for winning 126 points. Looking at that system screen made him very interested, as he had won some supplies. He kept watching the system store for some time, but was interrupted by someone knocking on the door. It was Shanshan, who was saying they had captured a suspicious person. The protagonist, with a serious look, warned the young woman he would check it personally. The threat was a man who had been captured by Captain Lee and Brother Chi. When he arrived at the man, he asked what he was looking for. The man tried to explain himself and asked if the young man in front of him was the leader. The protagonist himself confirmed that he was and introduced himself, saying his name to the stranger. The man, trying to show satisfaction, also introduced himself, revealed his name, and said that he came from the metal factory. The staff at the base did not seem very pleased with this intruder. Seeing Uncle Song's reaction, the protagonist asked if it was his location that the man had described. Then the protagonist asked the man what he was doing there since he came from so far. He paused to hear the explanation, but the man just said that times were chaotic. Seeing that the justification did not stick, the man added that his leader had asked to look for survivors. The man's mask fell when the chubby glasses guy revealed that he had made a map of the place. After handing the map to the protagonist, he decided to observe the drawing carefully. Given this situation, he preferred to activate the Eye of Mind to see the truth. The Eye of Mind revealed that this man was hostile. With this information, the protagonist didn't hesitate and already looked for defense. He told the man that he was no innocent. He knew how things worked and demanded the truth. Without another way out, the man swallowed hard. He insisted that everything he had said was true and that he was just being cautious. The protagonist cleverly asked his friend Chai if that man knew about Brother Chong. Since the answer was negative, the protagonist decided to let the man go. The man could hardly believe that he had been released, and he even received from the protagonist's hands the map he himself had made. The man bowed a few times, thanking for his life. After that, he hurriedly left there before the staff changed their minds. As the man ran away, The protagonist was thinking about the steel plant and was already planning the points he would earn. 5 months later, at the West Steel factory, people were living their lives normally. 2 workers were talking about the disappearance of some people and about a certain monster. As they spoke, they heard a strange noise. One of the workers advised the other not to check and leave it to the guards. However, he didn't listen to the advice and was hit by a sharp object. Meanwhile, one of the guards was standing, enjoying a tobacco. He was called by the screams of a worker who was approaching desperate, asking for help. The man thought he could only be the one attacking again. That was the version he believed in. The guard immediately imagined that the attack had occurred without warning. The order was clear. Only the evolved with skills should go after him. Scared, they returned to the place the noises had come from. The guard also warned that if they encountered the tentacles man, they should not fight, just run. While speaking, one of the guards was hidden behind a pile of rubble. He seemed to have seen something, and therefore paid more attention to the detail. Upon noticing some footprints on the ground, he deduced that the tentacle man had captured a victim and fled. The guard also noticed that since the coal plant was destroyed, the number of missing people kept increasing. However, in his mind, he suspected that those acts were not performed by the tentacle man. Elsewhere, someone thought they had lived more in this life than in the previous one. He was thoughtful, as months had passed and the mission for the steel plant had not yet appeared in the system. While reflecting on this, the staff who had gone out returned safely. He jumped from high above to welcome them and hear the news. The protagonist wanted to know from his friend Chai if no one had noticed the hunting operation. He also wanted to know if Xiao Shuai was already getting used to the situation. The youngster, now with the responsibility of his mother, had eliminated a zombie on his own. He appreciated everyone's progress and asked them to store the mutants' cores. When a new mission came, he was in doubt. Would it be something related to West Steel people? After that, he spent some time, and he was in a meeting with Captain Lei, who asked if he would infiltrate alone. In Song's opinion, those people had bad intentions. However, the brothers could be assured because with his current strength, no brother Chong could hurt him. He also took the opportunity to ask Old Lai and the captain to take care of the fortress. Upon hearing this, Old Lai said he didn't need to worry about such things. Meanwhile, at the enemy base, someone had urgent information to report. Despite insisting, the man was barred, since he had no permission to see the 2 leaders. This left him extremely displeased, and he grabbed one of the guards by the neck. When another guard asked if he had gone mad, he released his colleague's neck. For a moment, he seemed to regain normality. The man who had been grabbed was coughing, trying to recover. Meanwhile, Lei Cheng thought his emotions were taking over. From inside, someone was shouting that he could come in. The guard at the entrance heard this and let him through. Lei Cheng slowly went in and came face to face with the boss. She was standing there, with a calm and confident demeanor. He reported to the boss that he had a different theory about the tentacle man. However, after hearing everything he said, she kept silent, just watching. Only then did she ask if he was saying there was another enemy. The woman asked him not to spread that information, despite it being very useful. The man tried to argue, but she assured him that things would not get worse than they were. Leaving her office, he remembered that there was something he had not yet asked. She glanced to the side and saw someone who was very careless. She stated that if he were as meticulous, he could continue the work from that moment forward. Smiling, he replied that he would make the mess while she would take care of the cleaning. With that, it became clear that the 2 of them were behind the disappearance of people.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.